Great, our recording is on. So I'll just remind councillors that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded and will be made available on the Bay of Plenty Regional Council website following the meeting and archived for a period of 3 years. So our purpose in doing this is to provide greater access to council debate, transparency in decision making and encouraging openness. I also remind all present that local government decision making affords no protection to councillors, council officers and the public for comments made during meetings that are subsequently challenged in a court of law and determined to be slanderous. So if there is an emergency and we need to evacuate the building, we will exit via the front door in the foyer and meet across the road. And if everyone can just follow the instructions of staff. So we're going to open with a karakia and I will ask Councillor Tafo, please open.
Tēnā koe, Madam Chair, tēnā tātou. I ngā rangatira, nau mai hara mai whakatau mai ki Wanganui a tātou o te kaune he rā o toi moana. Nau mai hara mai maria mai o koutou nei māramatanga ki te kaupapa o te rā. To our visitors, welcome. We're looking forward to hearing your presentation this morning. Nō reira, kia hihiri tātou. Kia tau te rangi Māori o Ranginui e tui honei, o Papatuanuku e takoto nei, o te tai ao e awhi nei. Ki rungia tātou o toi moana e tau nei, ti hei, Māori ora. May the peace of the sky above and of the earth below, as we o toi moana embrace the universe and its surroundings upon it is life. Tēnā koe.
Ora. So I have Councillors Campbell and Grayling online, and we have an apology from Councillor Kumar. And I think Councillor Dougal may possibly be leaving early today. And also apology for lateness for Council Scrimmager. Do we have any other apologies? I don't think we do. Ken, is he? We'll take an apology from Councillor Shirley. Thank you. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Chair McDonald and Deputy Chair Dougal, the seconding. All those in support? Thanks. Great, so I declare the motion carried. We're now going to open to the public forum, and I would like to welcome members of Project Parore, who we have here today. We've got David Peters, who is Chair of Project Parore. We have Julian Fitter, and we also have Brodie, and I've just forgotten your surname, but I'm sure David will remind me, who's also part of Project Parore. So welcome, David. You've got 10 minutes to speak, and then we'll take some questions from councillors.
Thanks, Kate, and good morning, everybody. Tēnā koutou katoa. I'm David Peters, and I've been chair of Project Parore since 2021. Renaturing Katikati is a subsidiary, right? Is a subsidiary of Project Parore, and I've also been the secretary of Bay Conservation Alliance since it began 10 years ago. I grew up in Tauranga, but left to seek fame and fortune in the late 1970s. I returned to the region 10 years ago and lived near Katikati on State Highway 2. Not very famous, but with enough fortune to be able to live independently. I brought Project Parore's general manager with me, Brodie Davis, and Julian Fitter, who's the chair of Bay Conservation Alliance and also a society member of Project Parore. Michelle Elborn has come with us over here. She's BCA's Chief Executive Officer. And it'll become obvious later on why I brought BCA's people with me. Sorry, this is all frozen up. Oh, I'm putting it on here. So 22 years ago, a group of Katikati citizens formed the Uretara Estuary Managers to address the problems facing the Uretara Estuary and river. They incorporated in 2006 and since then have been focused on the health of the harbour and the streams that feed it. Since starting in Katikati, we've enlarged our vision to include the whole of the northern Tauranga Harbour, which in 150 years has been severely degraded with silt and nutrients. Project Parori's got a paid team and volunteer team. Our board are all volunteers and include farmers, orchardists, retired teachers and committed environmentalists. We have an urban volunteer group, which we call Renaturing Katikati, which works in the reserves and rivers and what have you around Katikati itself. And Project Parori pays a volunteer support coordinator to work with our volunteers and organise events. She's funded through Western Bay of Plenty District Council grant. I've put up there how we've been funding ourselves over the last few years. The Ministry for the Environment has supported us for many years through the Freshwater Investment Fund and then Jobs for Nature. Our current funding deed with MFE expires in June this year, and that provided us with 1.75 million over 5 years. Tegton Bay Trust have been very generous, and we've also got a number of service contracts with the District Council and the Regional Council on parks and reserves. Our main business really is developing environmental plans together with the council, land management officers and private landowners, and working on their properties to implement these plans. We've been looking for more commercial opportunities to increase our sustainability and reduce our dependence on grants. And we're increasing the amount of money we recover from landowners as we work on their properties. What I haven't listed up there is the other funding support we get. Local businesses sponsor us. There's various smaller grants we've applied for special purposes, such as Swamp Maori or our mural, which I'll come to later on. We run corporate planting days, and we run an annual charity auction, which we didn't run last year because last year we were in a rather protracted process of moving from our old workspace to our new workspace. I'll show you some pictures of that later on. We've built a very substantial native plant nursery there because plants are one of our biggest expenses. Organisations with a mix of volunteers and paid staff need to be quite finely balanced. It helps if everybody is motivated by a shared set of objectives, which help to direct purpose-driven social enterprise. We've all had practice recently at envisioning at the Bay of Plenty Regional Biodiversity Symposium. Well, my board can wordsmith it with the best, so I thought I'd share our vision with you all. So our vision is a restored, resilient landscape where Indigenous biodiversity thrives, freshwater and estuarine ecosystems flourish, and a thriving harbour reflects the health of the land. In our purpose statements, I've highlighted some of the keywords that illustrate our kaupapa: partnering, collective action, collective stewardship, collaboration, and safeguarding future productivity is important. We have to work with farmers and ensure we don't put them out of business. But we're looking to improve biodiversity and community outcomes. And I think one of the outcomes of our work is better security for the whole community, for transport corridors, commercial and residential investments. Our operations team is ably recruited and wonderfully led by Brady Davis. He's made sure they are well trained, very well equipped, and directed to work on the things that matter to us. And it's working exceedingly well, as the key metrics I've put up there show. These are some of the most important metrics that we have, and I haven't included all the others, things like fish passage remediation, the number of community engagement events we run, both for urban communities and rural communities. We often co-host the rural ones with Landcare New Zealand Trust, And also the Bioeconomy Science Institute has been involved in several because we're doing work with them to do with dung beetles. Of all our KPIs, the only one we're behind on is pest animal management. So I'll just run where these metrics originate from. These are from our June 2025 report to the Ministry for the Environment. That was the end of year 4 of our 5-year grant. And on the right there, I've shown what the targets we were set in 2021 were over 5 years. So where they wanted 50,000 plants, we've already done over 300,000. They were expecting 100 hectares of land retired. We've done 166. That was at the end of year 4. By the end of this year, we'll significantly exceed all our metrics. In terms of developing and thriving, our future depends on building our business and managing it well. That means building strong relationships with community and agencies. We value all of those relationships, but the ones we have with the regional and district councils are particularly important to us, and we really appreciate the support we're given. It means investing in the right things, people and capital. And we've invested for the future because although we're making inroads, there's a huge amount still to be done. A montage of some of our operations team. And on the right, there is a stream health scorecard where which we use to engage with farmers and landowners to do a very quick assay of the quality of the streams on their property. And I've told our team, if they find really good water quality, a really healthy stream, then we need to tell the landowner our duty is to get it fenced and protected. And if it's a really bad stream, really poor quality, we need to fence it, get it protected. Ducks at the bottom there as well. Anyway, all work and no play can get a bit tedious. So last week we revealed our mural at the base, our new workspace. The artists who are affiliated with local marae were given a brief that asked them for a creative visual for Project Parore to remind us of our responsibility as a community-led kaupapa, to keep connected to mana whenua, to all the rest of our community and to our environment. Their work grounds us into Taiho and links us to Te Tangata, and as you can see, the event attracted wide interest from our community. Quickly going to talk about renaturing Katikati, because that's a significant part of our activities in town itself, and that's all volunteer-led. As you can see, there's we get involved with the schools. We've got around 71 volunteers presently, working on quite a range of projects, but one of the things I think is important is how much we partner with others. BCA's nature education program, which is funded by the District Council and involves multiple schools in the Western Bay. We have a special relationship with the primary school and the college. And Project Parore and Renaturing Katikati works with the Western Bay Museum frequently on events, displays and activities. And we run quite a large number of community workshops and events in partnership with Pest Free 2050 and the District Council and the Regional Council. So I'm going to move now. I've given you a bit of a picture of where Project Parore is at and what we do. I'm just going to talk about some of the challenges. There's not a huge amount of time, so I'm just going to talk to a handful of these. Locally, I've put a couple of headline ones up there, which most of you will be aware of, the Chudley wetland and J Swap's quarry expansion. But I've highlighted that staying connected with local hapu at governance level is one of our challenges. We maintain respectful relationships with the local hapu with positive engagement at a grassroots level through practical restoration work. And several of our staff are from local hapu. Engagement with marae leadership is more challenging as priorities and aspirations may differ, especially when changes in leadership occur. But as we operate in the environmental restoration space, we are mindful of hapu aspirations to be involved in restoration and monitoring within their rohi, and we continue to try to find ways we can collaborate on projects of mutual interest. Regionally, I'm going to have to talk about Canada geese, swans and weeds. I get called about Canada geese 3 or 4 times a year. I've talked to a large number of people about what can be done. It's not something that we can address locally. It's pointless. We'll just move the problem elsewhere. We need a regional approach to this. And I have suggested that Tauranga Moana Biosecurity Capital might want to get involved with BCA to develop some sort of approach, but we really need some regional leadership on these things. Nationally, Ministry for the Environment, as you all know, has been sidelined, and the Ministry for Primary Industries has assumed the lead role for catchment groups. MPI, reasonably enough, has a focus on primary production. And they've said they can only support farmer-led groups working on productive land. Catchments by their nature are not defined by whether they are productive or not. And if we assume the goal of catchment groups is largely to improve water quality, then the whole of the catchment needs to be considered. That assumption may prove to be wrong yet. The assumption about catchment groups working on water quality, as MPI has not been clear about its goal or its objectives for catchment groups. In fact, they've expressed some scepticism about whether Project Parore meets their criteria of a farmer-led catchment group focused on productive land, and those discussions are ongoing. Very hard to please everybody, I know, but last week an opinion piece in the Rural News caught my eye. After reading the first paragraph, I thought it might be some good news in the face of so many recent disappointments. It says sheep and beef farmers will be worse off under the new environment legislation than they were under the Resource Management Act. However, what this chap, he's Jamie McFadden, who's the Groundswell environmental spokesperson, what he's railing about are new regulations requiring freshwater farm plans on any farm over 50 hectares. 50 hectares doesn't seem like much of a reach. It may seem like a pretty insignificant run to a very large run holder, but to me, a 50 hectare cutoff seems a significant hurdle to making real improvements to our rivers and groundwater. Let me show you what 50 hectares looks like in our corner of the Bay of Plenty. So I've highlighted on that map where the white blocks are. Those are properties that are larger than 50 hectares. That's between Omokoroa and Tuapiro. I found 24 properties out of 5,000. The good news is that a lot of them are in the headwaters of the catchment, but the other 5,000 properties in there are some of the most valuable and productive land in the Bay of Plenty, and they're excluded from the requirements that are being proposed at the moment. And I think really what I'm trying to say here, I've estimated, if we say that each property of those 24 properties is 100 hectares, which is a bit generous to be honest, we're still looking at about 90% of the land in these catchments being ignored. We can't fix catchment problems by ignoring that much of the land in them. So Project Parore works wherever landowners are ready to make some sacrifices and improvements. We depend on our regional council support from land management officers and the science team to help us make landowners make positive changes. Reasonable regulations are a start, but what helps us make real progress is financial contributions to restoration projects from the regional council. In the Western Bay of Plenty in particular, we have a lot of small holdings, but together they make up whole catchments, mountain to sea. My last comment on that slide is really that we need to consider protection, restoration and conservation investment in relation to risks, real risks, not arbitrary criteria such as the minimum size of title. My time is running out, I know, so I'm going to cut quickly to why BCA is here too. MPI has been urging the formation of regional collectives of catchment groups to reduce the need for MPI to deal with hundreds of groups nationally. In the Bay of Plenty, there were 3 hui last year to discuss the idea, and at every one of them there was a general consensus that the idea makes sense and that BCA was the obvious group to provide that support in the Bay. Project Parore was a founding member of BCA 10 years ago, and that was before I got involved in Project Parore. I got involved in Project Parore through my contact in it, in BCA through it. That relationship we have with BCA, that Project Parore has with BCA has provided us with immeasurable help. And presently all the other major catchment groups in the Bay are members too. The main reason that Bay of Plenty's catchment groups rallied behind BCA was the consensus that catchment group work is conservation work. That vision apparently may not align with MPI's. So there's more work to be done before this is all settled. We're discussing the next steps on the collective this afternoon with Chris Ingle, Janine Orfield from MPI and Nick Edgar from New Zealand Landcare Trust. So I'm going to wrap up now. Back to this photograph, which was on the start of the presentation. This is our new base in Katikati, and this is in January this year. That's us right in the middle, the long green strip. Behind us is the McKinney stream, which runs into the Urutara. I'd like to say it's behind us. It's actually all around us. And we're literally at the bottom of the hill. Thankfully, with an eye to a resilient future, we built on high ground, the old railway line embankment, but we came close to a complete write-off. Others in the district weren't so lucky. I've given you an overview of our organisation, what we're trying to achieve, and how we're doing. I think we're making progress, and you can see a difference already in the hills, gullies and wetlands around the Katikati district. In the Tamania catchment, which is probably the most remediated, the flooding at State Highway 2 in January was far less impactful than in previous similar events. So our work is having an effect on resilience, on roading and on safety. And I speak on that from my own experience. I live at the bottom of the Tamania catchment near State Highway 2, so I know when it floods, and it's flooding far less than it used to. So we're working with Bay Conservation Alliance, the Regional Council and others in the region to build a sustainable ecosystem for catchment groups, because community-led action makes a difference. What we need is more common sense from Wellington, more money from everybody, and ongoing support from you, our Regional Council.
Thank you, David. That was an excellent presentation. I think it is a great ground setting for the rest of today's agenda as well that we're going to look at within the committee. And I just want to acknowledge Michelle and Julian in BCA, and we are very lucky within the Bay of Plenty to have BCA supporting with important administration project management functions for all these really amazing care groups in the community. And I think it's given us a really good picture of how catchment groups like Project Parore work, supported by BCA, by the Regional Council and the other agencies. And you've given us a very good outline of the challenges that you face, particularly in regard to funding and the broader legislative and regulatory environment. We haven't got too much time for questions, so I'll just see if we have one burning question from anyone. Any of the councillors? Shall I do? I'll do the chair, Matamana, the chair, Chair McDonald, and then I'll go over to Councillor McCorkindale.
Tēnā koutou. First of all, thank you for the great continual work that you continue to do out there. My burning question is, have you prepared your submission to the annual plan, particularly on our third topic around biodiversity?
Not yet.
Not yet.
We're planning to.
Right.
I
Encourage you
know
to.
BCA will, and I'll be trying to with Project Parore, but you probably appreciate we're quite busy.
Thank you.
And BCA is working on putting in a submission as well. I'm working on it.
Very good. Thank you.
And we do encourage all groups, care groups, and people who are interested in the work that we do at the regional council and the biodiversity work that is being done around the community and the broader bay to look at the long-term plan and annual plan that is out for consultation at the moment, and that consultation is due by the 2nd of April. Councillor McCorkindale.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much for that presentation, but probably, and I don't actually have a question, I really just want to say thank you for being the glue and the energy behind this work for such a long period of time, and really just wanted to honour the contribution that you are all making. And I know how much time David, you and Julian put in for nothing voluntarily, and you have literally you have breathed your breath and energy into this project. So thank you so much. Honouring the practical and the social outcomes that are coming as a result of this work. Something I take away from what you've said, and it is very much about the kaupapa of regional council as well. Regulations are our bottom line, but we want to achieve so much more than that. We need regulations, sure, but what I hear from you and what I believe is that advocacy, advice, education, and incentives are actually what are the tools that get these real changes happening in the catchment. So really just want to say thank you and add to what our Chair Matamoana has said. Bring this back to us in your submission to the annual plan and the long-term plan so that we hear from the community that the work that we are doing in support of you is really important and you want to see it continue and grow. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, can I just add one thing? And David mentioned some of the problems we have. I believe the real problem is complete lack of awareness in the general public of the issues, and that training and education are the key ways that the community groups are great and do a wonderful job, but they're dealing with a very, very small portion of our landmass. And we need to get general acceptance. David mentioned some of the problems like Canada geese. I think weeds are the biggest single problem because they affect productive land as well. And so education and training are absolutely key. And Bay Conservation has just launched an online and in the field training program as a result of the coming out of the Bay Conservation cadets that finished last year. So that's the one message I would like to get to the councillors, that we need to get the public aware.
Yeah, I'd absolutely support that. The public needs to be asking for these things to happen. That's fantastic. Thank you very much, David, Julian and Brodie, for your presentation today, and for Michelle coming along too. So, welcome to Councillor Shirley. So I'm just going to call, are there any items that are not on the agenda or any late items? Right, there are none. Do we have any changes to the order of business? Oh, great. We'll just do a declaration of conflicts of interest, and given David's presentation, then I'll just note that in my previous role on the Tauranga Committee of Forest and Bird, I had interactions with JSWAP around the Katikati Quarry proposal. Did anyone else have any conflicts of interest? Councillor McCorkindale.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So through my involvement with Sustainable Otikiri Incorporated Society, we've been involved in a legal action which is mentioned in the Chairman's report.
Great, thank you. No one else had any interests they wanted to declare? Thank you. So we're now going to move on to the presentation, and we have Charles coming, Charles Harley, the team leader of the coastal catchments. And Charles, would you like to welcome yourself sorry, introduce yourself. I will welcome you. You introduce yourself to the committee. Are you going to speak on the Waiotahi land acquisition and give us an update on that? Thank you. And so we are at, you're just going to speak to this. I don't think there are any papers on it.
And thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm Charles. I'm the current team leader for the Eastern Land Management team. There might be a wee change on Monday. I've just come in today to give you a very quick update on where this project is at. If you can cast your mind back to the councillor tour we did last year, this was one of the sites that we kind of stopped and had a look at over the river, and we spoke about briefly. And where this all came about from was there has been a planned upgrade to the state highway between Matakerapu, which is the turn off to go to Aporiki, and Aporiki Township, and Waka Kotahi have been doing a big safety upgrade project. And if you remember, we got stuck in the line of traffic when we were there, and part of it is going to be adjacent to this piece of land. And we were approached to see if we would be interested in going in with Waka Kotahi and acquiring the 16 hectares of land, which I brought to the council in August last year, and they approved that purchase. So just as a visual reminder, and hopefully it'll skip over to the so we've got the site here, and our 16 hectares that we acquired, and apologies for the shaky hand, is from there right around the edge back to there. And at the moment, there's a safety upgrade project there where they're putting in a new kind of a roundabout, and one there, which is the road that you take to go to Onikawa to Mawhai, our regional park. So there's a big safety upgrade project going there. And as part of that, Waka Kotahi, we're going to have to spend a considerable amount of money putting in an underpass, a second underpass for the dairy farmer to access that land. So we came together and decided a better option would be to invest that money in retiring that land. And so we were lucky enough to get Waka Kotahi to be the major shareholder of funder of the project, and we were the receiver of the funds and the land. So the land is in Toi Moana's name. This is just this is the earliest photo that we could find from the site, and this is in 1940. The shape of the site hasn't changed too much, but obviously what it's made up of has changed. One of the big changes is that the bridge has changed location too. So it's now all been straightened. But as you can see, the grass at that stage, or the pastoral area, was quite small. And obviously now it comes up to about here and right off to the edge here. So all of that salt marsh has been drained, and there's a stop bank that runs around the edge of it, and it's was used up until recently for dairy farming. So what the opportunities? The opportunities we've got are restoring some salt marsh habitat and inanga spawning sites. We've got a lot of volunteers working in this area. There's already a series of traps and bait stations around this parcel of land to support the native flora and fauna within that area. It's got one of the biggest populations of banded rail that we've seen in all of the harbour margins. It's a site for bittern and other species as well. So it is a really significant site, and the community have acknowledged that, and they're already doing a lot of work there. It's just on the edge, well, it's within the Headland Sanctuary project, which is looking at trying to make the area predator-free by 2050. And it's a really significant site for Māori. And it was a site that was used not only by whakatohia, but there was a corridor of path that came through for tūhoe to be allowed to gather from the area as well. So it's a site which is steeped in a lot of tradition and a lot of significance. There's an urupa, across from the spit. So a lot of people go to the pippy beds, as it's called, and a lot of people stop in there, and you always see heaps of people in there. But there's actually a really significant urupa across the other side there as well. So this project was seen as an opportunity to be able to bring everyone together, bring everyone's thoughts, everyone's ideas, and everyone's passion together. And so that's where we're heading at the moment. We can't get onto the site to do a great deal at the moment because of the works that's happening with the road. If you're going to a Poriki, just be aware that you're probably going to have a delay because of all of the works which are happening in that area. So the access to the site at the moment is restricted because of the roundabout and the safety upgrades. And when we acquired the land, we knew that we would have limited access to it for the first 6 to 8 months, and that was okay because Waka Kotahi had paid 73% of the bill, so we were okay with that. The end result. So that's some of the ideas. A question was asked, what our policy is. So we've got a policy around acquiring marginal coastal catchment land for the purposes of restoration, and it caps our contribution at $12,500 per hectare. And the cap was just to ensure that we weren't sending the message that we were out there buying really high-performing land, because we know that high-performing land comes with some really big prices around the ability to restore marginal land back to salt marsh or estuarine. So far, what have we done? The most important thing that we've learned is you've got to understand what you've got and what you're working with. So we've had the survey team out there, and we have flown it with LiDAR to get our contours and our heights. And so what we've taken from the work that we've done, and we've also put a gauge at the bridge down the bottom, which is measuring the flood, the tidal cycle and the flood heights, so we can understanding. We've taken survey points from around the estuary, so we understand at different tide cycles throughout the last, or it's live data, you could look it up now, what's happening with those heights. And that will influence the use of the land. So the pinkish area through there is obviously the higher land, and effectively everything in the kind of yellowy, mustardy colour, that's sitting within the prime salt marsh elevation. So that makes it a lot easier just to be able to do things like removing the stop bank and allowing the natural regeneration of that area with a minimal amount of interference or earthworks. So that's a really, really important part of it. So at the moment, we're still gathering the data, understanding if we do this, what the effect will be to over there, and so that we can take that information out to those community groups that have an interest in the area and have a chat about what we're doing. So this is what we're doing. So the stock had been removed soon as Waka Kotahi had to do their works. Part of their works is to fill in the underpass, which is already there. So the dairy farming had to stop, but we have asked the farmer to keep cutting and removing the grass, just so it doesn't become a fire risk to the wetland area. Fences, troughs, and all other infrastructure is going to be removed. We've asked just to leave the culverts because that becomes part of our hydrology equation, knowing what the culverts are and what they're up to. But all of the other infrastructure is being removed. The surveying I've touched on. We've got a group together of experts from within Toi Moana and with Whakatohea representative. And we're just talking about all the opportunities and all the information we need to be able to go to people and say, this is what we know about the site. What would you like to see? So we've got a group together. It's got scientists, it's got river engineers, it's got land management crew. We've got some biodiversity and biosecurity input into it. So we're making sure that we're talking to the right people. We're looking to have some meetings next month with the community and catchment groups. Now that we've got most of the information together, we didn't want to go out to the community and talk about things that we didn't know. So we're going out there with all the information that we have, and we can talk to them about the hydrology and what impacts and effects it will have. It doesn't, whatever we do, it will not have an effect on upstream land and properties. So we can't flood people and anything like that. So that was one of the things that we made sure we weren't going to do. And so I'll be doing the consultation along with the Whakatohea environmental manager, and so we'll be going out there and having chats around what's significant to them for that site. We did have to put up a fence because as soon as the people heard that the land had changed hands, they started driving down there. And so for the sake of the site and their safety, because there's still drains and bits and pieces through there, and we don't want people to drive into drains or to go down there and do things that they possibly shouldn't. So we've put a fence up, but we will be working on public access once it's safe to do so. And the safety upgrade is underway. So we're doing the planning. So once they've finished, that we can jump in there. And one of the things we did ask for was a good safe entry point to the site, because if you've been there before, it is in a high-speed zone. So that was part of the deal with Waka Kotahi, was that they left us with a good safe entry to the site. So I showed this photo last year, and we were talking about flooding, and we saw David's picture from earlier this year. This was the flood that we had, which was really focused on the Waitahi catchment, and this was the flood from last year. And so you can kind of see the outline of the property through there. Flooding is just part of what we've factored into it. And that's me, thank you.
Great, thank you, Charles. I'm sure that Waitahi estuary will really benefit from that acquisition. Councillor McMillan, do you have a question?
Oh, thanks, Charles. Really exciting to see this come together. Fantastic. I was just wondering around with Waka Kotahi, are they actively shoulder tapping us right across our region where opportunities like this arise? And are there any other stakeholders that are kind of scanning for these win-win partnership opportunities? Like, is that baked in, or is it dependent on one particular staff relationship? Or how guaranteed are we to know that they know that we might do that?
So with this one, and through the chair, we were fortunate enough that the project manager had been involved in a similar project in the Waikato.
Yeah.
And so he came up with the concept and brought it to us. We have had discussion with Waka Kotahi over other sites, more so where it's been consent mitigation and offsets. But we are definitely, through the funders group and other groups, talking about opportunities where we can come together and do this.
Yeah.
And there's another opportunity which might be coming to council within the next few months, around an opportunity to work alongside another group where there's going to be benefit, but we can't shoulder everything ourselves.
Yeah, no, this is really exciting to hear. And I think the more we can bake that in with everything that's coming at us, local government reform, whatever, these win-win stakeholder partnerships need to be, really baked in and concrete, so that no matter what happens, it's the right people are being shoulder tapped at the right time to grab these opportunities for land use change. But I'll leave it there. But thank you, Charles. Really exciting.
And welcome, Councillor Scrimmager. I think you've got a question.
Yes, Charles, I just had a question about removal of the stock bank. When is there a time frame for that yet? Because you talked about you've got the farmer cutting the grass in the meantime, and I mean, as soon as that happens, it won't be obviously grass anymore, but there's also the complication of access, and you're having to restrict people trying to get in there. At the same time, you're still trying to allow access to harvest the grass.
Yeah. So the harvesting of the grass at the moment is just at the moment, effectively, he's just doing us a favour, and there's no formal lease agreement, because as soon as we need the land and can start working on it, we will do that. We wouldn't be removing the stock bank on the estuary side until the end of summer, next summer. We have to get the earthwork season right, and we also have, it's an area where there's nesting requirements as well for the native nesting birds. So we want to get all our ducks in a row, make sure everything's all right before we actually do anything.
his activities will just continue through next growing season. That's, yeah.
Madam Chair, thank you. Thank you, Charles. That was really interesting. You've really brought it to life after the councillor's tour, so thank you. I really just want to sort of, kind of a question. It's around the engagement that we'll do alongside Whakatohea and what might be the implied promises that come with that engagement, and whether we are going to be really transparent that doing nothing could be an option. I'm just conscious it's a relatively low level investment for us. But what might be the cost implications of doing what the community aspires to achieve? And if the stop banks are removed, could we let nature just take its course? So I really just wanted to sort of tease that out with you.
So definitely that is the response that we're, the work that I've been doing with Whakatohea, I've been really straight up right from the start that the steer that we had from the council when we acquired it is around low input and looking for a nature-based restoration solution. And so I've made that clear that it might be a case of just removing the stop banks and allowing the water to come in, and then allowing time for it to regrow. And so that's been really, really clear. When we've been talking with our iwi representative so far, it's been around ensuring that we go out to the hapu and we talk about what opportunities are there and what opportunities aren't there. Because we want to be realistic about what we can and can't do. And the recreational activities and opportunities might be allowing for people to come down and go white baiting and access the land and be able to do things that they weren't allowed to do before because it was privately owned, but now that it's open, they can do it.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much, Charles. That's fantastic. Can I have a mover and a seconder to receive the presentation? Councillor McMillan and Councillor Defoe. So I'd like to put the motion to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Any against? So I declare the motion carried. So we're now going to move to the reports. So this is page 8 of our documents, and I am so we are going to have Reuben Fraser, the General Manager of Regulatory Services, presenting on this. But before we start on the Chairman's report, I would really, which covers a report on the January storm events, I'd like to take a minute's silence to reflect on the very real impact of this storm event. So as a community, we have been deeply saddened by the tragic loss of the lives of 8 people following the severe weather events of January 2026, where the intense rainfall triggered devastating landslides at Mauao and Welcome Bay, Papamoa. So as we reflect on the scale of this tragedy and the wider enduring impact on families, friends, and the wider community, I now invite everyone to join me in a minute's silence to honour those whose lives were lost. Thank you. I'll now pass to Reuben, if you'd like to introduce, I think you've got staff available to answer questions. Would you like to introduce the staff members as they come up to the presenters? And we can take questions after each report.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair, and good morning, councillors. Great to have everybody at the inaugural meeting of this new committee. The Chair's report is a regular part of the agenda that came to the predecessor of this committee, and depending on whether we get to have a bit of a debrief look at how the committee works this afternoon, my expectation is that will continue. And you'll find that we have a variety of staff from across the organisation contribute to that report and then attend the committee meeting to be available to answer questions. So first up today we have Glenn Ellery, who's come up here. Glenn is the manager of the Environmental Information Services team. who you will see out and about in the region doing a whole lot of monitoring and measuring things, and then turning the information that they get from that into information that can be used by everybody. So Glenn has contributed to the severe weather part of the chair's report, and he is going to, I think, try and do a live demonstration today of the environmental data portal, which is one of my very favourite things of this council to share with people outside. I think it's a fantastic resource. Glenn does have a backup PowerPoint just in case the live presentation doesn't go as planned, but over to you, Glenn.
Reuben, Morena Chair and councillors. So I guess I'll start off first with the events of January. And I don't have a presentation on that. There was a report in the agenda and attached in the appendices. So it's just really taking any questions that you might have. Great. So obviously, you got the impact of the severity of it. There'll be probably further work that goes on in terms of analysing that event. That was just an introductory report. Once the investigations into the impacts occur, probably those parties will do further work on it. So with that, I will challenge the idea of doing a live presentation of the environmental data portal. So just as an introduction, as Reuben sort of said, the team does a lot of monitoring for the council. We are a service delivery section for the other parts of council, science, engineering being our main clients. The value in monitoring is not in the collection of the monitoring, it's actually in its use. That's where we realise the value in it. And the environmental data portal is one of those ways to maximise the use of that data. So once it comes up, it's a viewer of a subset of all the environmental information we have. We have a large database sitting behind us that has about 9,000 discrete locations with environmental data against them that's been collected in the past. And this is very much a subset viewer of some of that information which is easily digestible by the public. It has a continuing growth. We've had about 900,000 views of the pages within the web portal in the last 4 years, and there's a continual growth. So from year to year, it just keeps on going up. The use of it is very much dependent on the weather. So if we have a flood event, we'll have 3 times the amount of people looking at this site than when it's just normal. So the public know that it's there and they know it's an access point to seeing what's going on. So this is the environmental data portal you can see up on the screen. And I'm just going to quickly whip through some of the presentations that are in there. So I guess the first thing is this landing page. Right down the bottom here on this list of things here, there is this watch video. It is a good point to start. It gives a little video briefing on what's in the portal. So that's a good starting point if it's your very first time there. So then I'm just going to go up to the left here and sort of walk our way through some of these options here. So first we have a number of dashboards. So these are built based upon what people have asked for in the past, or what messages that council wants to deliver out. So there's a number of dashboards in there. Probably the key ones that people really get interested in are things like the latest river levels. And I can click on one of those and it lists all our river level sites based upon catchment, whether they're rising, falling, what they look like. And then we have a map view. And so here's a map. We'll try and, I won't try and zoom in a bit. That's the map of the region. That's our rain gauges across the region. You'll notice that there's on the eastern border, there's a few that are actually outside of our region. That's because we're actually pulling in some of Gisborne District Council's rain gauges because they help us with our flood management. So you can click on any of those dots and that will actually take you down into that location and provide you some more information about those sites. And I will go into where that will go. So we can go into any of our sites and pull out that information that exists at the site. So on this page, which is the dataset page, I'm actually going to go to site on the Kaituna. So this is that site, and it's just defaulted to the first screen. But at that site, we can pull down the data sets. Now, at that site, there's actually 27 different discrete pieces of types of data that are recorded. One of those is river level, but it's also, you can sort of see there's lots of water quality, there's lots of flow information, there's consenting information in there as well. So I'm just going to go to a simple old water level on the Kaituna at Te Marae. So by default, it just comes up with the latest data, which is the last 3 days, but we can actually change the date views, and I am going to go down and so
Madam Chair, the wave pattern, is that because of these floodgates at Okerre, is it, that it's going up and down like that? Is that?
through you, Chair, that is actually tide, so it's tidally affected.
So this is low down, is it?
It's low down, yeah, it's at the state highway, so yeah, that's the tidal signal, but hold that thought and I'll show you a yearly view. If I bring up last year's, all of the last year's data, sure. Yep. So this is the yearly view of that same data. And you can sort of see the ups and downs in there. Where there's those sudden drops and then it sudden spikes up. That is the control gates, the impact of the control gates. We can actually, here as well, we can turn out on our standard flood warning levels. So you can sort of see where they are. They are first warning levels and second warning levels. Those are the warning levels that the flood room put out. January this year. Yes, we can see January this year. Step forward a year. So the interesting thing about the events of this year was it didn't actually create huge floods through the rivers because it was very localised rainfall. It wasn't across all of the catchment. So then we also have some tailored report views. So these are reports that are useful to some people. And I'm going to use an example of one which is, if I can see it on my screen, a soil moisture report, which is actually used by the farming community and also the dairy sector. By default, I'm just going to use one on the Wairoa River. Okay. Why is that not coming up on the screen? I opened it up somewhere else. Here's that report. So this was basically a standardized report that was asked for by Fonterra in response to soil moisture. So it basically shows soil moisture through the year and compares it to last year. At the bottom, it's showing rainfall, which is this year, last year, and the average rainfall. And so it gives a picture of everything that's happening on one page. The interesting thing, this is not just useful for the dairy sector, it's useful for floods and it's also useful for droughts. So we're talking about wet and dry. Now I have to switch screens again. The other important part of the data portal is the export. So what this does allow is users to actually pull the data that we record out and use it themselves. So we used to get a lot of consultants ringing up for data, which chewed up staff time. They now know that it's here, that they can go and find it themselves and pull it down. And so that's a really sort of useful functionality. But this is all human driven. Alternate to the environmental data portal is also a machine to machine portal that we operate. And this allows data to go to things like Land and Water Aotearoa, the Met Service. We have just had an inquiry from the Whakatane District Council who want to use the data for developing their own roading inundation model for floods. We have iwi using it, iwi partners for Matauranga Māori sort of science comparison purposes. So it just continues to grow. So the key message is we're just trying to get our data out there. It's been collected using their money, ratepayers' money, and the more use we can get out of it, the more value we can get out of it.
Councillor Katashay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I use this a lot. It's wonderful. I've been using it since the old river monitoring system that we used to have. Because living in Whakatane, you have to be in touch with the river levels as soon as the rain starts. So the one thing I would say about it, that I love it, it's beautiful, but except when you're trying to use the river level stuff on a cell phone, it's extremely difficult to be able to overlay things like warning levels. That's just some feedback, but oh my gosh, beautiful work. Keep up the great work. Thank you.
I can kind of respond to the cell phone thing. The real challenge with cell phones is that they are not standardized. Their operating systems aren't standard, and so it's very hard to build anything that can operate on all cell phones. That's the issue then.
Councillor Crosby.
Thanks, Glenn. That's great. I've just been looking at the Aquarius time series data and the saturation point, which made me reflect on what kind of data, if any, do we have or should we start to gather along with our partners with regards to when slips could occur. Because, you know, the river levels and the lake levels and flooding is great. I think we do a good job on that. But it's becoming quite obvious that more and more, you know, land slippage is becoming a critical issue. And should we have a role in collecting data for that and some form of prediction as well? Big question, I appreciate that. But, you know, if I was a member of the community watching this, that's a question I would ask. Not just as a result of recent events, but historical events as well. It's seems to be becoming more prevalent, which is linked to, you know, climate change and topography and geology and all these other issues.
I can't answer the question directly. It's obviously one of those things that will come out in course. I know Earth Sciences New Zealand are looking at a land slippage tool, and there has been some inquiries with the regional sector about using their rainfall information, which is one of the inputs. So that's in play at the moment. We will just see how that goes there. But all our data is open, and we will make it available if it's required.
Then I can add
a question.
I can add a little bit of context for that, Councillor Crosby, if that's useful. You have an update coming to your council meeting at the end of the month in relation to recovery from the January events. And part of that is Mark Ivamy and other people in the Mooters team who have reprioritised some of their natural hazard work, and they will talk to you about what they're up to in terms of that landslip risk monitoring.
Thanks, Glenn.
Great, thank you. I've got, for next questions, I've got councillor McMillan and then councillor Grayling, then councillor Scrimmage, and then councillor Defoe, and then councillor McCorkindale.
Oh, mine was really quick, just in terms of getting the message out there that there is this data. Where do you think the gaps are, and are we, in terms of people who might need this that aren't aware it exists, and what are we doing, or what could we do to enhance that? And it may be more of a comms question, so it might be outside of your team, so happy to defer that. But yeah, if there's anything that we could be doing in terms of awareness raising of these tools that we're not, can you see a gap there, or?
No, I don't think there's any gap there at the moment. It is those comms messages, and every opportunity we get to do some comms on it, we kind of do that. So we draw people's attention to it after every event, or there's the air quality, the mountain air quality, and those sorts of things as well that we draw attention to.
Councillor Grayling.
It helps if you can hear what I'm saying. Sorry. I was just wondering, it's probably a bigger picture thing. Do all regional councils collect and present data in a similar way? And in terms of if we didn't, is it part of our regulatory functions in terms of civil defence and emergency management to capture and keep this data? Because I know from the farming sector, a lot of them use it for the soil moisture, and it's a huge asset. Thinking in terms of the wider restructure and the functions that we carry out, I was just wondering where this would sit if it wasn't sitting with the regional council.
That's a great question. So at the moment, firstly, all of the councils do collect the same sort of data. There's 650 rain gauges across the regional sector network across New Zealand. And there is work amongst the special interest groups within council through Te Ure Kahika to basically do some data federation. So we are actually trying to build a federated data source. So it's all the councils still owning their data, but pooling it together and doing some standardized reporting. So there's already work going on there. There's a project in place to build that federator, and there's some initial sort of example products that we're producing, which are manually produced. So there's a real recognition that there's more value than just region by region. It's national reporting as well, especially when it comes to things like floods and droughts, which move from region to region. There's a real value in that. So hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, it does. It's definitely a regional council delivery function, and just hearing, 900,000, visits to the site is clearly providing an incredible service to our community. I'm just not sure, unless you're a farmer or you're actively using it, that whether people are widely aware of its availability, but clearly 900,000 it is. So thank you for that.
Yep. Mine was more of a comment than a question, and it was in relation to Stuart's question around landslip risk. On the graph you had up earlier, there was lines. I think one was wilting point, stress point, field capacity and saturation. And I would have thought that the saturation line started to be a pretty good indication of when slipping, risk the land. I know there will be variation between sites, which complicates it, but so it's not as simple as that. But I would have thought that that was a good starting point to having that information. Is that correct?
I can't comment in terms of slippage. That was really built for flat land, and saturation to ensure that for compliance purposes that it wasn't irrigation of effluent onto saturated land that would then flow off into drainage areas. So that was kind of what that report's for. That was built for the dairy sector. So yeah.
I'd just say that from my personal experience, when the ground is saturated, that's when it slips.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hi. The chair. My question is, what is the percentage given, give or take, for the accuracy of the data collection?
Right, so all of the majority of the data that's on there is collected to a recognised standard. So within New Zealand, there's some national environmental monitoring standards, which basically put some measures around how you collect data and grading it as such. So sometimes there's a case for gold-plated data, which has a very small percentage, and sometimes there's a case of bronze is enough.
So what do we use?
It depends on the use case, because there's a cost in monitoring. To get the gold-plated monitoring, it costs more than the bronze. So it's very much about what's the purpose for the data collection, and then deciding what we want. And when we make that decision, it's not just about not made on just what the project it's supporting today is. It's also thinking about how it may be used in the future. But generally, our data is collected to the highest standards, and it's not done on percentage. It's like, for instance, water quality, water level might be measured within plus or minus 3 millimetres in a river.
So if you're saying that we use the highest level, so we're on gold, or?
We generally target the highest level.
Okay, the reason for that question leads me into, if there's a heavier rainfall on the top of the catchment and it affects the bottom of the catchment or release of water, how much of an impact of this data actually has a significant level of change in it? For example, through the heavy rainfalls that we've had in Rotorua, it has a huge impact right through the Kaituna River, right down to the bottom of Te Puke, coming down to Maketu. And so our houses up the top were flooding because it was heavy rainfall, which sort of would, if released that water coming down, it would have had a less impact for the top of the whānau anyway. But the question was really, for that percentage of data, how quickly can we act in supporting our communities when this data is produced?
So all of that data that we collect, which is basically, it comes in near real time, it gets delivered to our flood room, and they make those flood management decisions. So I can't really comment on their decisions.
But it's instant though.
It's basically either it's coming in every 10 minutes, basically.
Okay, because the data that Rotorua had in regards for their rainfall didn't really match up to the data that was received to the flood room. And so hence the question on what is the percentage of accuracy around that whole thing. But thank you for that. It did answer my question. Tēnā koe.
Yeah, the last question was Councillor McCorkindale.
Thank you, Glenn, for the work that you do and that presentation. That was fantastic. This might not be an easy one to answer, but clearly this is a regional function and an interregional function. And so with the threat of local government reform, what do you see are threats and opportunities that come with that reform to this particular function? Sorry.
I can't speak on reform. I think at the end of the day, it's such an important function, somebody has to do it. We have infrastructure in terms of assets throughout the region that are in place. So, you know, the reform has to consider about infrastructure and all of that. So very much in our team, we sort of see it's a regional and national focus, and it's something that's very important. And so we just watch.
Is it likely that they could suck it up into something, one of the new Crown Research Institutes, because it's got a lot of similarities with some of the work that NIWA does? Is that something that anyone's sort of floated or mentioned, or is it just rumours?
I think Namusha's going to comment on that 1 minute.
Koutou Chair and councillors. In terms of reform and impact, we are still working through as an organisation and looking to understand what the potential impact is of the draft bills across our organisation. But certainly we haven't had any signals from central government that there would be changes in relation to monitoring, environmental monitoring.
Stay regional, is that what you're anticipating?
Through the chair, as part of the resource management reforms, from what I have read and understood, there hasn't been any signal that there would be a change in environmental monitoring. So certainly resource management reform is over here, simplifying local government is over here. And so in relation to the reform space, there hasn't been any indication that I've seen.
Okay, cool. Thank you for that. What was going through my mind was potential division of the region into multiple unitary authorities, which it is potentially a possibility. And then what happens when you have a regional and cross-regional and national function like this? So thank you for sharing your thoughts.
Thank you both, Namita and Glenn. I think we've had a really good illustration of just how important all of this data and monitoring and information is. And I think the questions reflect particularly the discussions we've been having and some of the presentations we've been hearing, particularly from the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment, about maintaining that catchment focus too, and making sure that you don't ignore natural boundaries, which goes to the Rotorua rainfall versus the downstream effects. So thank you very much for that, Glenn.
Thanks, Glenn. I should just introduce as well, while Glenn's walking back, Angie Perks. Hi, Angie. Angie is one of the team leaders in the Environmental Information Services team, and I think was probably here to as emergency support for Glenn if the live demo didn't go very well. But Angie keeps all of that stuff going. We don't have any other presentations in relation to the chair's report, but we do have people available to answer your questions if you do have any. So Jackson Efford. Jackson is the principal advisor in the Coastal Catchments team in relation to land and water. And so he is available to answer any questions that you have about the land management update. We have Greg Corbett online, another recently transitioned principal advisor in the biosecurity area. Greg's here to answer any questions that you have about the biosecurity update. And we have Nick Barnes, who is one of the team leaders in the consents team, who can answer any questions that you have about the consents update in that report.
So should we just go through it? Did anyone have any questions around the land management update? Councillor McCorkindale.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, I've only written down numbers as references for my questions, so I might jump around a little bit. So my question relates to, in the document, it's 2.2.2, which is the Hill Country Erosion Fund update. And do we have a sense of what proportion of the region or steep slopes is actually vulnerable? Do we have any kind of data set?
Good morning, councillors, Chair. Through you, Chair, yes, we do have a pretty good idea. Obviously, nothing beats boots on the ground, but we have regional models and maps to identify that kind of area. Steep erosion prone pasture is a priority, as we know that land without trees is most likely to erode and slip. And so by each catchment, we've got maps available online showing the hectares of erodible land in pasture. And it's around about 6,000 hectares using our approach, using erosion susceptibility classes and the consideration of the catchment and what's at the bottom, whether it's an estuary or a lake. So we also have the SEDNet New Zealand model to show the yields of sediment from different catchments. And we also have inherent biophysical risk maps, which help farmers kind of plan out where erosion is most likely to happen on their farms, and that can be really useful for farm planning. So we're well placed to prioritise that work.
Thank you very much.
Do we have any further questions for Jackson? Thanks very much, Jackson. The second one was the biosecurity update. Great, yeah, Greg's online for that one. Councillor McCulkadale.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And hi, Greg. I've got a question around the golden clams response. Obviously, it's not a new threat to New Zealand, but it's a new threat to the region. Who actually takes the lead when we have a new threat to the region? That's the first question. And then the second question is, can the regional council can we step in and fund, for example, extra check, clean, dry advocates in such an event while we're still planning our response?
Good morning, councillors, and for you, Chair. Corbicula, as you're probably aware, was detected in New Zealand in 2023. MPI initiated a response of sorts. It was quickly realised that these things are not eradicable. So that response at the middle of last year transitioned to long-term management, which basically puts the responsibilities for responding back to regions and communities with support from MPI and the Department of Conservation. Te Uruka Hika has worked with MPI and DOC to develop a guide for how we could coordinate responses. So that's a living document, and Taranaki, unfortunately, were the first ones to give that a test run at the end of last year. But basically, it's a shared responsibility there now. Regarding funding of advocates, we already do fund Te Aroha Lakes Trust to work at boat ramps, not just on the threat of gold clams, but other biosecurity threats, including weeds and catfish and things like that. So we already have advocates working across our boat ramps in the Te Aroha Lakes every summer.
Thank you, Greg. My question was probably more about, are we in a position to increase funding when we have a substantial threat like this? I understand that we fund this work and staff are involved in this annually. So yeah, it was really around how flexible can we be when we have a new threat like this?
Well, yeah, so we do have obviously funding through the biosecurity budget that funds, obviously a whole heap of work. Depending on the direction from council, that funding could be reprioritised to certain areas, including additional support in there if that's councillors' wish. But as I say, at the moment, we already have a reasonably good level of activity at boat ramps. Following the arrival of gold clams in our neighbouring region.
Thank you, Greg.
Crosby.
Thanks, Greg. On the same issue, and appreciate the collective response to date. Do we have a sense of the attitude, for want of a better reason, of the users, be they in boats, jet skis, any kind of aquatic vehicle, with regard to this issue, particularly the non-resident ones? I'm not sure if they were able to separate who was a resident. I'm sure it's probably more exercise this than potentially a non-resident. Do we have any feedback from, the summer activities?
Great question, councillor. The Lake Okareka Community Association, you're aware, they've done they're under their own bat, they've initiated a really great amount of surveillance over January and then Waitangi weekend. And on top of the own work that we've done with Te Aroha Lakes Trust, we see typically around 2% of our boaties turning up to boat ramps with some form of weed or sediment contamination on their vessels, unclean. But we also are aware that quite a few of our boaties, despite what's gone through social media, what's being promoted through MPI and ourselves, are still relatively unaware of what they're required to do. So while we've only got a relatively low level of boats turning up with some form of contamination, I'd say that there's a fair bit of luck involved in that. So this has really been the driver for the Lake Okareka Community Association initiative, where through their engagement with boaties, they've seen what we've found as well, that while there's a low level of contaminated boats turning up, there's still a level of ignorance or just a lack of understanding of what proper decontamination actually means.
Well, thank you for that. And I guess that leads on to supporting Councillor McCorkindale's issue around where we could allocate our resources or more resources in that space of just education in particular. Do you have a view on that, or can there be a report to us on that as we move into our our annual plan amendment, annual plan, I should say, on this particular issue?
Yeah, it's
our decision.
Yeah, it's an interesting space because the check, clean, dry message has been going now for over 20 years. And yeah, and I suppose what we've found is there's still a level of or a lack of cut through in some of that messaging with some of the boaties. And at the moment I'm unsure if investing more in that space is what's needed. I'm really supportive of where the Lake Okareka Community Association are going, where they're looking at a more directive approach to requiring decontamination rather than relying on voluntary compliance in the space. I know the Community Association have been working hard on their plans and that they are looking to bring their thinking to both the Lakes Council and to our council at some stage in the next few months. So I'll just be trying to keep this committee posted with developments there.
Thank you, Greg. Did anyone else have any further questions for Greg? Great, thank you. And the third report was on the update on consents, and we have Nick Barnes. Does anyone have any questions for Nick?
Thank you very much for you, Madam Chair. Firstly, I'll wait for Nick to arrive. Hi, Nick. Just on item 2.4.2, which is the summary of the KPI indicators, and just to say congratulations to the team because it looks like a fantastic result. So yay, awesome. And so my question relates to item 2.4.4, which was the 2026 water consents. Obviously, this is the end of 35-year term consents. Are there any concerns from council that this might have gone under the radar for people who are holding consents, and they may still be in the dark about this? That was my question.
Kia ora koutou, Chair and councillors, and thank you for the question. I think it's right to point that out as a risk, and it is something that we identified at the start of the project. So around about probably about 8-9 months ago now, we've done 3 sets of direct communication with the consent holders. We have also compliance when they're doing inspections. They can also carry that message for us as well. We've done some industry communications through NZKGI, and we've also put, articles in things like Coast and Country and stuff like that. We are still finding that is happening, and as we batch the consents, the consent planners are actually getting in touch with anyone where, for example, in a catchment, we might have a load of those consents that have already been lodged. They're actually just ringing the consent holders and talking that through with them, offering them advice where they can. But it is a risk, but I think we've got all our bases covered. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? I'll just, and just to reiterate Councillor McCorkindale's comment, it's great to see that consistent trending improvement and actually exceeding performance targets, which is really great to see.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that takes us to the end of the the chairperson's report. So thank you very much, Ruben, and staff involved in those excellent reports. So can I please have a mover and a seconder, please, for the chairperson's report? Councillor Motby and Councillor Scrimmager. So I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour of accepting the chairperson's report? Against? I declare the motion carried. Thank you. Now, I think we are now going to stop for a morning tea break, and we will just stop for 15 minutes. So can we please have everyone back here at 11:15? Okay, we're going to start again. Welcome back, everyone. We are now going to move into item 8.2, which is regulatory compliance activity update. And we have Matt and Stephen to speak to these reports. Would you like to introduce yourselves, please? So we're at page 52 of our papers.
Morena koutou, ko Matthew Harricks toko ingoa, I mahi anō hau mō compliance manager Land and Water, Moana. So I'm one of the compliance managers here at Bay of Plenty Regional Council. I look after the Land and Water team, doing all of that side of the compliance aspect, and I'll let Stephen introduce himself.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, councillors. Stephen Miller, the other compliance manager. I'm responsible for the team that has a more of an urban focus, the pollution hotline, 2 priority sort of airsheds, industrial discharges to air, geothermal energy, and that encompasses the Port of Tauranga as well.
Did you want to speak to sections of the report?
Yeah, so normally we'd provide a bit of an update in the chair's report, but just for the timings this time around, there's quite a few big chunks, so we thought we'd put a standalone report for you. And at that same time, we gave an opportunity to update you on where we're at with our activities. So I just want to acknowledge May for the good work she's done with her wastewater compliance report there. There's quite a lot of work there comparing where we're at across our region for our municipal wastewater sites, and it's pretty comprehensive. But it does make it really easy when Taumata Arawai come knocking at short notice asking for us how we're doing monitoring our territorial authority partners. But I think the key highlights for me is just the quantum of work that gets done by our team. There's 2,500 consents we've monitored so far this year, 1,500 site visits that they've done, 8,600 reports they've all looked at, points of data to make sure that people are doing what they're permitted to do. So it's just a huge amount of work. But I think probably the key piece for us is that where the real workload comes is probably the 2 to 5% of the non-compliance, the significant non-compliance. That's where the real volume of work comes in for the team. It's the hard work, but it's important to do that so that everyone else can see that they're being held to account the same as everyone else.
Thanks, Matt. My highlights, the pollution hotline continues to be a valuable sort of forward-facing tool. It discovers breaches of our regional rules and legislation. Odours from the industrial sites continue to be a challenge, but particularly in the Mount, but we do have a plan and we're working with all stakeholders to improve the situation. The Rotorua airshed lost its polluter status last year. That's 5 years without an exceedance in that airshed. And this Thursday, the Mount airshed will have 2 years without an exceedance. My thoughts of the report, maybe it gives the committee an idea of the wide range of work that the compliance function covers. There's a lot in there, but it definitely gives you an idea of where we all are and what we're doing.
Brilliant, thank you. It certainly does give us a really good view of the breadth of the work that's being undertaken within the council. Councillors, did you have any specific questions? Councillor Crosby.
Oh, thank you for that. And yeah, I really do appreciate, the wastewater report coming from the other side and now on this side. It's really interesting. I guess my question is, and I was trying to work it out, with Three Waters reform, about role definition between ourselves, Mata Arawai, and Commerce Commission as the economic regulator, possibly somebody else. Is that clear yet, or we're not quite sure, as many councils transition into other, be it CCOs or some other entities?
Through you, Chair, I'd say the short answer is not quite clear yet, but at this stage, we see our role continuing largely as it is in terms of the regulator process. Even with Taumata Arawai coming on board, we're still doing a lot of the face-to-face compliance regulatory functions there, and I don't see that changing in a hurry. So I think what we're seeing is, as the new standards roll out, the consenting requirements might be simpler, but there'll be other pieces that we need to keep on top of, and that still front-end regulation sits with us rather than any other regulator at this stage. So clearish, more to be gained.
Kia ora, thank you for the report. One of the things that you've probably noticed that I've always questioned when we've covered the Mount Equality, thankful to see that there appears to be an improvement in 2 full years without any breach. My question is, and my question remains, is that we still don't know, however, the impact of past breaches and whether or not the current threshold is still correct, given that we have never ever had solid information around the impact of those breaches on human health. And I still haven't seen, and I know we've had reports from Toi Te Ora, and I know there has always been an argument of whose lane it is to be looking at it. And so for me, it is still a burning question around the whole pollution and monitoring of that pollution in that Mount area. I guess it will just be a matter of time before we are able to assess whether or not the impact on health has been affected by that whole pollution area. And that still remains a concern for me. But insofar as being able to get statistics of those residents in those areas is still an outstanding matter in this piece of work that I'm looking at. The other concern that I've had, it's gone beyond the area, and we have heard at past meetings, at the air quality meetings, around some of those residents who live in that Ranch Road area and those residents around the Mount College area, where the pollution has reached those residents, and some of the complaints of those residents that some of their children, in their minds, were becoming affected by that. So these are still burning issues for me, and I think for all of us as a council, that we are still unsure around whether the impact of that air shared pollution is being fully addressed. And for me, the jury is still out on that one. I don't, you can answer that for me, but I think I know what your answer is going to be. But I think it's something that I feel should still be tabled as part of our report as we go on. We have not forgotten about it, and we really are still, it's a part of the research in my mind that has not been forthcoming and is still outstanding. Kia ora.
I would like to comment. I would like to say that I fully agree with your comments, and we have tried with public health several times. I don't disagree with a word you said, and we are fighting the hard fight.
I'm sorry,
Chair, we've lost connectivity.
It's all right. I was just pausing whilst I was thinking. And Councillor McCorkindale has a question to come, but just picking up on Chair McDonald's point, I wonder if the committee might like to consider asking for health data. I'm not quite sure. I'd need to get some instructions on what we might be asking for. But do we need some further health data to underpin the regional spatial plan that that's going to be being produced going forward?
I can give you my thoughts, Madam Chair, if that's okay. And Namuna might want to jump in here as well. The RM reform says that the environmental limits to protect human health will be set at a national level. So the way that I interpret that is it takes discretion that this council has away in terms of just saying what those limits will be. Our role will be to recognise those limits that are set and then carry on with our planning and response to make sure that if there are likely to be breaches or there have been breaches, that we get back into a compliant space. So I think in terms of practical action, I think council has had updates on plan change 13, where we got to with that, and the things that flowed out of that, such as the interim permitted activity monitoring and response to a different sort of exceedance, a different level, the unsealed yards, the various things that are happening around bulk solid materials, to just carry on that trajectory, I think, of picking up what you said, Matamoana, that doing everything that we think this council can do to continue to improve air quality, both within the airshed and within that residential area. I think we might hear some announcements out of MFE in the next little while about what they're thinking in terms of what those national standards might be. And we will have an opportunity to input into that. I think that's where this health data really will be really valuable.
Noting that we are expecting some standards to come through MFE, and that the staff will be keeping a watching brief on that and inputting, particularly in regards to the Mount air quality airshed. And we will perhaps keep that as a live topic before the committee. Are you happy with that?
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and I agree that we have got a specific swim lane here. But I think this is a circumstance that we've tried to address it, and we've found it very difficult because we've had to stay within our swim lane. But I just wondered if we can start thinking a bit more outside the box. So how do we become an advocate? How can we play an advocacy role, though, and not just keeping within our swim lane? Because surely as the Bay of Plenty Regional Council, we're strong enough to play an advocacy role, and maybe to bring in, or do we bring in the Ministry of Health? We've tried it at the local level, and in my view, they haven't had enough authority to address the concern. I think it has to go to a higher level, and we've never used our advocacy to go to that higher level, even at that ministerial level. So maybe.
Mind if we pick up on Kat? I think she's just picking up on this.
Councillor
McMillan.
Yeah, just sort of supporting what's said, but I suppose in my mind that what I'm thinking is, you know, we, through all of your work, all of our work, plus things like the Environmental Accord and all of the partners in the Mount Maunganui Airshed Working Party, Air Quality Working Party, to go above and beyond regulatory. I mean, regulatory, as Sarah mentioned to a previous item, is kind of the bottom line, and our bar is way higher than that. So I think if, you know, our commitment here is that we're always working way above and beyond compliance. You know, first cab off the rank. I mean, there's been lots of cabs off the rank already, but, you know, the next cab off the rank is to be a non-polluted airshed, which we're on track to do. But that's not where we'll be stopping. How we advocate, I mean, I think it's through to Urukahika at the national level in terms of air quality and health, where we can add bang for buck. And we certainly use this as a case study in our submission to the RMA reform, because this is a classic example of where if you're not able to regulate the way you need to get better air outcomes, then everyone's sliding backwards. So I guess I'm supporting the corridor, but noting that I believe that we are absolutely striving for much better than just, you know, the regulatory baseline, and there's a lot more work to do. And I'd be interested to know, to the chair's Matamoana's question around how we can advocate further, but yeah, I'll leave it there.
It's on the same point, Councillor Shirley.
Yes,
Yep.
it is.
I'm just getting a bit concerned the way the discussion's going because, we've given a swim lane for very good reasons. And I guess my question through you, Chair, to Ruben is, how stringent, how appropriate are the national directives on public health issues? It's a highly specialist field in terms of environmental impacts on human health, and everything in the environment has an impact on health potentially. So there are national standards. I understand they're quite robust. And for us to sort of start suggesting that we go above and beyond those, I think is very dangerous territory for us to get into, exceeding regulatory requirements, assuming that the regulatory requirements are robust and sufficiently stringent. So through you, Ruben, Chair, can I ask Ruben just to expand a bit on the breadth and the appropriateness of the national regulations from a health perspective?
Yeah. Through you, Madam Chair, if that's okay. I think that's a good question, Councillor Shirley. The short answer in my mind, and Marion's here, she might want to jump in on this as well, that we do have national environmental standards for ambient standards for air quality. They have been in place for a considerable period of time. And I think since those standards were introduced, the science in relation to the human health impacts of air quality have progressed significantly. This council has written to the minister before encouraging the introduction of a limit for PM 2.5. And I think, if I understand correctly, the work that the ministry is doing at the moment, looking at things like the World Health Organization guidelines for air quality, all the science that has progressed, we will see changes to those standards. And if we think about Rotorua as an airshed, also updated in this report, if PM 2.5 is introduced, a limit for PM 2.5 is introduced, then it seems very likely to me that we will then have, as a council, more work to do to continue to improve air quality. So I'm not saying that we necessarily advocate for those limits, but we do, I think, need to put in the information that we have in the Bay of Plenty, that places like Toi Ora, Ministry of Health New Zealand have studies that they've done. We just need to make sure that all of that information is on the table for those standards to be appropriately set.
On that point, with the particulate matter 2.5, I understand a large proportion of that is actually sea spray.
The exceedances that we've had at Ranch Road, and Stephen might want to add to this, my understanding is salt is not a big proportion of the PM 2.5, but it does make up a large proportion of the PM 10 fractions that we have, around 50% sometimes. And the exceedances that we've had at Ranch Road have all been primarily caused by sea spray, and therefore have been granted exemptions by the minister. So they're not then considered exceedances of the standard.
Councillor Dougal.
Thank you, through you, Chair. On a similar topic to Councillor Shirley, with regards to that PM 10 and that PM 2.5, in the report you talk a lot around the contribution of home heating in both those numbers. I guess I'm interested to know, is it our role, or are we involved in education to the residents around home heating, and I guess the learnings we've had from Rotorua in that space? I introduce Marion Hendon.
Councillors, through the chair, we in the Rotorua airshed, predominantly our air pollution is smoke from home heating, and that has been our focus. So for the last 15 years, we have been addressing that by reducing the amount of smoke in the airshed. So whether that be swapping out and retrofitting the older burners with cleaner, wood burners that produce less smoke or swapping out those burners. So, sorry, I'm not sure. I didn't quite catch the question.
I guess in the report, it made reference to that 1/3 of the PM10 and the PM2.5 is coming from residential home heating. And my question was specifically around the airshed. Are we undertaking any campaigns to the public around reductions of home heating through wood burning, as we've done in the Rotorua airshed?
Yep.
I think the short answer to that, Councillor Duga, is we haven't. So, yeah, you will have seen the information about the dust apportionment study that the Port of Tauranga did in the report. I think fair to say that it was a surprise to see how much of that particulate matter was coming from home heating in the Mount residential area. But it hasn't led to breaches of the standards. So that hasn't triggered this council to go into an education or an action plan to say, how do we get it back into the standards? Probably pretty early in terms of having received that report, and the working party will figure out whether there are actions that need to fall out of that for any of the participants in that party, I think.
Sorry, I just wanted to comment on Councillor Shirley's sort of comment on my comment about the above and beyond. So obviously you've got the compliance with PM10 and then the bringing in of 2.5, which I think will be the announcement. But what I'm talking about above and beyond in the Mount airshed is, you know, all of the other things like odour, the soot, all of those things. So it's kind of broader than just the particle matter. And that's what I'm referring to, that a lot of work is being done in this space for all of those things, not just particulate matter. So, yeah, thanks.
Hi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, before I lose track of my notes that I've got here in front of me, I've been waiting for this particular part for a very long time. Anyway, my question is, are TAs up to date with their compliance and consents in regards to wastewater?
I think what you'll see through that wastewater report is that there's some definite challenges there for them. But what is pleasing for me is that those significant non-compliances, which is the real high risk stuff, are pretty low. So the wastewater compliance for the TAs is really challenging because there's such a funding aspect to it, aging infrastructure and old consents. So we take a fairly collaborative approach working with them to ensure that they understand what's required and are meeting those standards. But my overall, I guess if you had to ask me where they're looking overall across the country, I think we're reasonably well placed. There are some very old struggling systems, but then where the investment's been made, we're seeing some real gains as well.
Okay, and does the consent process have reference to Kaitiaki or Mana Whenua? Because they're two different groups. And when TAs actually apply for the renewal of their consent or take part in the consents, especially in Rotorua, they've just finished their submissions around the wastewater stuff, and there was a huge uproar in regards to no consultation of the wastewater going into Rotorua Nui a Kohumata Momoi, which was a significant part around the lakes, the Te Aroa Lakes Trust, and we do have a obligation under our treaty compliance to them. And so my question basically again is, does our consent process have reference to Kaitiaki and Mana Whenua?
I'm not 100% certain, to be honest. But I do know that with the new wastewater standards coming through, that's going to be another challenge that we need to work through as well. So the national wastewater standards that have just come on board have set limits and set pretty strict requirements for how we are able to consent those limits. But what we do is work pretty closely with Mana Whenua and Kaitiaki to ensure when we're doing our compliance role that there's a good understanding of how we can participate and partner there.
Oh, great. So that was my next question around what interactions do we have with mana whenua or kaitiaki in regards to the system being implemented, which you answered, which is thank you. And does those considerations of the things that are hindering our Māori people in regards to that take effect in the consent process? Do we actually take that on board? For example, Wāhi Tapu, we're talking about a sewage line coming from Tarawera all the way through Wāhi Tapu of Rotokākihi, where old urupa and old wharenui used to be held, and hence the reason why that lake has been cut off to public because of its Wāhi Tapu. Do we have a process in place when dealing with those sort of confrontations with TAs and mana whenua?
I can talk about that, Matt. I think, Councillor Tawhai, there's quite a long history of consenting processes for wastewater around Rotorua, as you'll know about. I think the key ones that jump into my mind, Rotorua Lakes Council did apply for a resource consent to discharge treated wastewater into the lake. And so there was quite a prolonged process of engagement with mana whenua and kaitiaki about whether that was acceptable or not. It did go through a direct referral process, and where it got to was our staff report, which went into that process, highlighted the concerns, the outstanding concerns of mana whenua particularly, including Te Aroha Lakes Trust, and then Rotorua Lakes Council abandoned that proposal, and now they're in the situation of needing to continue to irrigate that wastewater to the forest while they find a solution that is acceptable, more broadly acceptable, I think. Rotomā, Rotoiti, Rotoehu, wastewater is another example where Rotorua Lakes Council had a consent refused for their initial wastewater disposal field. And one of the lessons that they learned out of that, I think, is the importance of that early engagement co-design approach to the treatment and disposal of wastewater. And so we did see a much more successful consent process for Rotomā, where everybody was on board with that. In relation to the pipeline through Rotokākihi, we addressed those things where they fall within our mandate. Really, our role as a regulator in relation to wastewater is around the treatment and disposal. And we have numerous examples of those proposals that come forward that involve the transfer of wastewater, whether it's treated or otherwise, through Wāhi Tapu for one, but sometimes just other rohe that can create issues as well. And so absolutely we need to try and navigate those issues through our consent process. They do take all of those things into account.
Thank you. I think the biggest part out of the whole equation is that people don't feel safe that we are doing our job properly to consent those regulations within our district, and the importance rolls around what it actually has effect not only on the lakes but the effects it has on our people in that area. And I think the significance part around it is that I don't want to be one of those councillors that haven't said anything at the table, that hasn't supported what the discussions are around it. And I just wanted to make note of that because on last week's Sunday, the Rotorua Lakes Council held their reform around this wastewater, and it was noted that they were no longer going to or able to send the wastewater up to the top of the fields because it wasn't doing its job around the nutrients, and it wasn't being proactive in regards of how much they could do up there. Plus, they didn't meet the standards of mana whenua or iwi in regards to this waste of the waste going in there. Now, the biggest concern for mana whenua is that there has been 5 breaches within the last 3 months in regards to overflow of the wastewater going into Lake Rotorua, and the engagement around that was because of the floodings and the heavy rainfalls, but there was still no limits around what was being done in that setting as well, especially when the pipeline broke and water and wastewater made its way into Lake Rotorua. And Kaitiaki, Hurunga Te Rangi, had made several attempts to council in regards to that breach around the wastewater of where they are located right next door, and they didn't feel like they were heard. And I just wanted to ensure that we, as Bay of Plenty Regional Council, our consent process is compliant to ensure safety around iwi Māori, safety around our councillors around this table, and safety in regards to our communities that we serve. Thank you, Madam Chair. Kia ora kōrua, ngā mihi.
Thank you, Councillor Defoe. Councillor McCorkindale, you did have a question before.
Mine will be a little bit easier. So mine relates to the NCAP data, and I noted that we've got 60% of data collected, so 40% of our rural landowners have not supplied data, and this isn't meant to imply blame at all. But given that nitrogen is such a focus area for council, especially around the Rotorua lakes, what does this mean that we're operating blind? And then also, what about the organic nitrogen sources? So for those who aren't familiar with the NCAP data, it's you're required to report your synthetic nitrogen use. So if you're an organic fertilizer user, you don't need to report it through the system. So my query is, what other mechanisms can be or are being used to gather that data?
Through you, Madam Chair. So in the Rotorua catchments, there's specific rules for farmers there where they're required to have nitrogen limits. They are effectively consented to those limits, and they provide reporting of their nitrogen, which is well below the 190 kgs per hectare per year that the synthetic nitrogen cap puts in. So effectively, the NCAP reporting didn't really provide us any more valuable information than we already had through the process there.
Thank you very much for that explanation. I did have a second question, if that was okay. So my second question relates to item 7.3, which was implications for Māori. And so my question was, how do we share the good news compliance stories? Because I noted in the report that we share the non-compliance, but do we actually share the good news? Because it looked like non-compliance is a very small part, and you're doing a great job, and people who are consent holders are doing a great job complying. So how do we report compliance?
Yeah, so I think through the report and through the national report as well, you can sort of see, as well as you see you're drawn to the red end of the graphs, but the green end is probably the more important stuff for us. And when you're seeing levels of compliance at around sort of 73, 80% of every inspection that we do, that's pretty significant. And for us, that means that engagement through the consenting process, that engagement we're having with those regular inspections is paying off, and we're getting really good value. If we're going out finding that those levels were dropping, then we'd need to start thinking about, are we achieving the right stuff? Are we sending the right messages? But I think when you look at us nationally compared to similar councils across the region, our levels of initial compliance when we get those inspections are relatively high. And then at the other end, where we're getting the significant non-compliance, there's a relatively small margin there. So yeah, I think the bad news stuff always comes out, the prosecution stuff always comes out, but we can probably do better about talking about what that compliance means. So we'll take that on board. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Matt and Stephen, for your reports, and thank you, Marianne, for your input as well. So I would now like to put to, can I have a mover and a seconder for the regulatory compliance activity vote? Yep, great. Councillor Mockbee and Councillor McCorkindale. All those in favour, say aye. Against? So the motion is carried. Thank you. And we're now moving on to item 8.3, which is page 280 of your documents, which is the Environmental Code of Practice for Rivers and Drainage Maintenance Activities. And I think Chris Ingle, you're going to be speaking to it. Thanks, Chris.
Kia ora, councillors, and thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, sorry, apologies from Dan Batten. He couldn't be here today, so I'm in the hot seat. This report supports the work that Rivers and Drainage does in the river schemes, which is a permitted activity. And part of the conditions of that permitted activity is we need to report to councillors about how the work's been going. Have we had a lot of complaints from people? How have we resolved those complaints? How are we managing relationship with the hapu and iwi that are within our river schemes? And, you know, are we doing things responsibly, I suppose, would be the summary of it. So I'm happy to take the report as read, but I'm also happy to answer any questions that councillors have.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chris, my question was around the iwi management plan. So I noted the hapu iwi management plans, attachment number 3. And I really just wanted to get a sense check on, they're listed here, but what does our work actually look like when we interface with these?
Yes, very good question. So the iwi and hapu management plans within the scheme areas, which is that table listed there, they really guide day to day how our rivers and drainage operators and operations team members plan and carry out the maintenance work that they do. So by we look firstly at the plans because they identify things like cultural sites, sensitive sites, environmental priorities of each iwi or hapu, and the engagement expectations that they have, because they do differ between areas and between iwi. So, and then we that influences how we schedule the different works. So there might be some gravel extraction needed in a particular reach of river, and because the iwi management plan says, well, we don't want that to happen during a spawning season or something like that, then that helps. But really what it triggers is the face-to-face meetings that we have with different iwi, where we meet with them and go through the next few months worth of works and actually go and visit sites and talk with them about their requirements. And that has been, I think, working particularly well, and certainly in some parts of the region, it's been working outstandingly well. So, which you may have heard about actually at the Rangitoki River Forum. So yeah, the iwi management plans are a starting point for a conversation and for a relationship around how we manage the awa.
Thank you very much for explaining that.
Julie?
Yeah, could I ask the question, you know, my involvement with the Ag Advisory Committees and the various river control drainage schemes, there seems to be some natural tensions between our own consenting processes, the timeliness of it, and the urgency of some of the works, and the frustrations in getting consents for what is almost routine activity that's required, and the cost that we incur because of those delays. So I guess it's just a question of, can we better streamline, and I'm not suggesting that we give ourselves a fast track that isn't open to everyone. That would be inappropriate, but I'm just, from the feedback I get from the drainage schemes and the river schemes, there's a lot of frustration there. And I presume the general public have the same frustration with all consenting processes.
Yeah, I'm struggling to think of an example that's frustrated me lately. So I think the consents team and our teams have been working pretty seamlessly lately. Sometimes it's a matter of our operations team allowing the right amount of time for the consent process to go through. Sometimes there can be examples where we're just trying to do too much in a season, and things just have to take their time and go through in an orderly fashion. A lot of the works covered under this resource consent are, of course, permitted activities, so there is no delay caused there. And I think the regional plan and Bay of Plenty is pretty good at enabling permitted activities and river schemes, but there are the odd example where you find that you do need a consent, and sometimes that takes a bit longer. But I also understand that with the revisions that the central government is making to the RMA, that there is they're looking at streamlining small scale activities. So we'll be I guess participating in that as river scheme management people and making sure that small scale things are included in whatever comes out of that review.
Can I ask from a river management perspective, are you comfortable that the conditions are appropriate in all instances
The conditions on consent.
on the consents that we put on ourselves?
Again, I can't think of any that aren't, but I might be at the wrong level to answer that question because I don't apply for consents or necessarily see the outcomes of them.
Chris, councillor Defoe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Quick question. How does one make their complaint on the complaints register?
Oh, any way you want, really. You can ring up or you can write a letter. We just got one in today, actually, and I just passed it on to Dan and Kerry, but any in writing or an email.
Okay, so a phone call?
Yes.
Okay, so for example, I'm going back to the floodgates again. And this particular group of people that live right on the side where there's always an overflow before the floodgates are open, to let the water flow out. If they rang up to make this complaint of that their water was getting too high and to open the floodgates, would that be recorded in this complaints register?
I would expect so. Are we talking about the Okiri gates?
I think so, yeah. I'm not quite sure, but it was, I think it was that one, yeah. And apparently we got told it automatically opens up when a certain amount of rain falls down into that particular part, before that. But all we know is that it's operated from Whakatane or something like that, for the access of that.
Okay, maybe we need to find out which gates they are first.
I say it was in January. In regards to those floodings and stuff, it was exactly that time frame. And I'm just wondering because the only complaints I see on here are from 2024, and two of them, and so I can't see the phone call that these two particular people have made in regards to that particular thing. So I just wanted to know what the process was in regards to getting your complaints heard on the register, and I can read that what stuff are in place to do it, and I'm just wondering because at the end of the day, all I had to tell them was it automatically opens when it's at a certain level. But yeah, thank you.
But just to clarify, this review is for the 24-25 financial year. So events from this summer will be in the one you receive next year.
Thank you, Chris. Do we have any further question from councillors? Right, can I have a mover for the report, please? Councillor Defoe and a seconder. Councillor McMillan. All those in favour? And all those against? I declare that the report has been carried. We're now moving on to item 8.4, which is the Climate Change Programme Quarterly Report, and this is on page 290 of your documents. And we are now going to have a presentation by Nick Newman. And would you all like to introduce yourselves?
Good afternoon, councillors. I'm Nick Newman. I'm the Climate Change Programme Manager here.
Kia ora koutou, I'm Jane Palmer. I'm Senior Planner in the Climate Change team.
Kia ora koutou, I'm Rebecca Leper from the Spatial Planning team, Data Analyst.
Very much. Did you want to give a quick summary of your report, or would you just like to take questions?
Maybe I'll just start by saying we produce a quarterly report to this committee and its predecessors of our climate change work, which goes across organisations. So I have a small team and we coordinate work across a bunch of functions, delivering on our climate goals, pretty much every function you can think of. And that's summarised in the report for you, which I'll take as read and very happy to take questions. We also then have a short presentation just pulling out some highlights across adaptation, mitigation and kind of data provision that we'll do following the report. Happy to take questions.
Going to Councillor McMillan and then Councillor McCorkindale.
Thanks, team. Just in your report with the local emission data, this is page 296. You said in the last paragraph, the outputs of the platform have been incorporated into the regional profiles, and we're exploring options to make the outputs of the platform available to external stakeholders, e.g. priority one. That I think that's so important that everyone has got that data, and so that everyone's driving that bus, as it were. So what's the sort of time frames of that? Because I suppose in my mind I would have assumed that was happening as part of that, but
I'll do that now, part of the presentation.
yeah, it's fine to hold that if it's better.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'll do a demo of the platform so you'll be able to see the kind of information in there. But in terms of sharing it, we're working on what we can make as a public facing aspect to it so that that's more widely available, but that's probably a little while out. But with priority one, there's the energy leadership group, which they're doing some energy scenario modelling for that regional energy strategy. So I'm connected with them, so we'll be making sure they use the data from the platform as the inputs for that scenario.
About
modelling.
agriculture.
In terms of priority one.
Emissions platform, in terms of the data for that.
So at the moment we haven't got a public facing portal for that data. That's something that we're working on, but I can certainly support specific stakeholders if they're interested in accessing the data. At the moment, it's just something that's in development. So
that's fine.
Yeah.
I've just got a couple more quick questions, if that's all right. One is with the goal 5, the circular economy and land use change one. The blue carbon trial that you did, and so this is my sort of layman's synopsis of the outcome in terms of sequestration was not as exciting as had been hoped, right? So does that mean the blue carbon initiative is kind of dropped off, or what?
No, so yes, you're right. It's not a game changer.
Yeah.
I think what the science team's doing now is they're doing a third site, which is going to help, I guess, with our understanding, but also feed into this national picture. So there's still work going on nationally to understand the potential of blue carbon, and then how that might be, I'm going to use the word monetized, it's not quite the right word, but incentives to, be able to get those things happening by accessing markets. So that work's still going on nationally and here, but we can't hold our breath that it's going to be a
No,
big game
I
changer.
appreciate that. It
Yeah.
just wasn't on there, so I just wondered what's that. And my final question is, with the crisis in Iran, terrible situation, and the potential fuel crisis, are there any opportunities, and this may not be us, it may be obviously our stakeholders more, in terms of advocacy for transitioning to low emissions with daily activities, I mean, obviously things like mode shift and, all those things that we all know about. Is there is this an opportunity to punch in some climate action, or to further support stakeholders in this space? And I know it could sound a bit cold-blooded to go out of a crisis, there's an opportunity, but as Churchill says, never waste a crisis, right? So, are you thinking at all in that space with the current geopolitical situation?
I guess the lever that we have is around public transport provision. So I'm not sure if there are any thoughts with the transport team in terms of promoting public transport, but that's certainly a conversation we can have with them, because that would seem to be the obvious
I
one.
certainly asked a question of Minister Watts this morning about that, but yeah, but yeah, just in terms of, I suppose, the wider energy use and consumption, but yeah, I'll park that there. Thank you.
Sorry, was it McCourtendale first and then Tefo?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kia ora koutou. So my question relates to 2.1.2, which was the community-led adaptation. And I just wanted to I've got two questions. So the first question is, how do we select participants and promote this program? And are there any limits on who can participate in the program? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I can answer those. So it's community led, so it's people come to us when they when they're ready to start thinking about how they adapt. We promote it through we do profiles, we promote it through Around the Rohi, through our usual channels, but probably I'd say that most of the projects that have come to us have actually been through our people who are out there on the ground working with communities. And they start talking to them about what they're seeing, and then they come through to my team. So a lot of it's word of mouth. Some people it's through promotion. In terms of who can apply, it's a existing community that are starting to notice changes in the climate and that want to adapt. So it's it's not a private individual or a private sector thing. It's for actual communities. Was there a third question, or was that?
No,
that's
that covers it. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Kia ora. My question is, how do we sit regionally compared to nationally in regards to climate change, considering Dr. Mawera Karetai was at a national climate change hui, and there were some significant kōrero that was at the table. So I'm just wondering, where do we sit and how do we sit compared nationally as a region?
Okay, I can answer that from maybe if you want to comment on mitigation. In terms of adaptation, so we've seen now 3 regions look to imitate our community-led adaptation process. So Northland Horizons, and I just had a call last week with Otago Regional Council. They are looking to put a paper up to adapt what we do as well. I think what you might be referring to, so in terms of adaptation, I think as a regional council, I guess you can look in the report and see a mountain of work that we're doing across adaptation across teams. It's not just our team, it's the land management, it's the engineers. So I'm comfortable with where we're at regionally, very comfortable with the regional council. So I think in terms of leading examples, Christchurch City, I would say would be probably the leading territorial authority. They're very, very proactive, got a very large team in adaptation. They're doing a lot of proactive work. But again, that's led out by the territorial authority. So I guess we've been finding our space in terms of how we use and make good things happen from a regional perspective, from the regional levers we have. Do you want to make any comment about the mitigation side?
Kia ora. Yes, so on the mitigation side, I guess, again, there's a difference between what happens at the TA level versus regional. I think when we talk about the local emissions data platform, that's a cross-council collaboration. So we're trying to share intel and knowledge to support each other in that space rather than us reinventing the wheel. As Nick mentioned before, for regional council, the key lever for reducing emissions is public transport. For the regional council, the TAs probably have a few more levers. But there's also just that wider community buy-in. And generally, the national level policies don't stay at that national level. They don't kind of look to regionalise them. But I'm hopeful that through the local emissions data platform, we'll have a bit more skin in the game, that we can have those conversations with central government about the role of local government in that space.
Sure. Thank you. I bring that question up, Madam Chair, because at a forum that we had at Awanui Arangi last year, one of the biggest concerns from the attendees of that particular group was that they didn't feel connected and enabled as a community, all being supported by regional councils to stronger develop these sort of concepts within their communities. What it also identified was that there was nothing discussed to them or consulted to them in regards to what climate change had a huge impact on Māori. So that's where that question came from. Kia ora, ngā mihi.
I think we might move at this point to the presentation from Rebecca. You're all going to? Great, fantastic, which I think you're going to give us a demonstration of how you're using the outputs from the LEDP.
Yeah, sure. We thought we'd just pull out some pieces to bring to your attention. So if this is not on your radar, then please put it on your radar. So there's a National Adaptation Framework that was released at the end of last year. It got panned a little bit by being just a bit of a glossy, but there was actually meat in behind it. So basically there's going to have to be local adaptation plans that are produced in every region, and the priority locations for those will be identified through the regional spatial plans. So the planning bill will be the hook or the legislative driver for that. And as soon as that drops, then the clock starts ticking on those priority locations. So it's a mandatory matter in regional spatial plans. Following that, in each location, local adaptation plans need to be produced. So if you identify it, you've got to produce it, and you've got 5 years to do that and adopt them in every place from 2028. So that's when the spatial plans are adopted. We're waiting on an amendment to the Climate Change Response Act to lock in the details around those local adaptation plans. We understand that's still on the schedule to be done this parliamentary term. In terms of getting readiness for this, so we've got a cross-council team that's working on this, preparing this, supporting the regional spatial plan development. We're also looking at our all of our hazard data and what platforms we might use to be able to show this data to help with the prioritisation. And those criteria, which will be crucial, how you decide on priority locations. We're expecting that from this change to the Climate Response Act. So that's going to be a big deal in the adaptation space. So please keep asking questions and keep thinking about that.
And Nick, can I just ask, could you just clarify a little bit around what is included as adaptation within the National Adaptation Framework as opposed to mitigation too? So I'm thinking particularly about how you incorporate land use planning and things like that. And I have heard, and I know we've submitted in our submission on the changes that, you know, there are concerns that mitigation is not picked up enough in the, potentially in the framework. So I'm just wondering if you could comment on what is picked up in here.
Okay, I think I understand the question. So, and I might not be able to answer, it might be our natural hazards people, but I think there's, in my mind, there's two legs of the double. So this leg of the double is about existing locations that are at risk, and then how they adapt over time, how they deal with those hazards. The second leg of the double is, I guess, stopping dumb things happening, building in places that are going to expose us to future hazards. And so I think this is where you're talking about in here, and about whether any mitigation of those risks is taken into account.
Or avoidance,
Or avoidance,
and that's included in this framework and plan, maybe. I can see
that's part of the regional spatial plan. So the constraints mapping on land use, that's certainly part of that. That's the leg of the double that the natural hazards people deal with. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. And this might just help explain this. Sorry, I just need a couple of clicks here. So I guess we haven't had any real legislative mandate around adaptation. It's all been implied. And I guess we've been doing the voluntary pathway. So quite a few years ago now, Councillor Crosby, Chair McDonald, you were here. We talked about what are we going to do in this space because it's a void. So we decided to crack on with this community-led approach. So that's a voluntary pathway. And now we're going to get this mandatory pathway around the spatial plans and the priority locations. So, and those two things can talk to each other. They can be lessons. And I guess we've been building our capability through that voluntary pathway over the last few years. And the role we play vis-a-vis the TLAs in the mandatory space still to be determined.
Kia ora, just a question. Given we've done that amount of work, do you have a level of comfort that our assistance to those various marae have got us to a point where they can sit with a level of comfort of what they've planned, or do you think there is still work that's needed to progress from where they're actually sitting in that plan?
That's a $1 million question. I think there's a level of knowledge and understanding about the pathway ahead that's there, but there's a big disparity in the ability to move forward. I think if you look across different examples across the region that we've supported, some are very well resourced and have land available if there needs to be relocation. Others know they have a finite period, but they're hemmed in with nowhere to move. So I think there's I wouldn't say comfort, I wouldn't say I'm comfortable, but I'm comfortable that the conversation's been going on, the technical support is there for those, for that planning. And so the next piece is really putting that into action. And I know some of those, two examples are talking about the need to relocate and how to make that happen over time. So the fact that we've got to that point where they understand the timeframes and understand what needs to happen, I think is a good, good first few steps on the pathway.
Yeah, and Nick, you mentioned that the council-led mandatory aspects yet to be determined. Could you sort of expand on that?
Yeah, sure. So I guess what we've been seeing is we've seen the cabinet paper behind the National Adaptation Framework, which has quite a lot of detail in it. At the moment, everything that's come through into legislation is only a little piece of the puzzle. So we're not sure yet what's going to be in the Climate Response Act, what might be in following guidelines. The piece that's, I guess, for me that we don't know is who will be leading these local adaptation plans. Will it be the Territorial Authority? Will it be them with us? Will it depend on which Territorial Authority it is? That for me is the bit that's unknown at this stage. Whether we'll have one priority location in our region, or whether we'll have 5 or 6, depends on the criteria, which depend on the Climate Response Act. So all of that's just spinning at the moment.
Sorry, I'm probably sounding a bit pedantic now, but it's probably because of, what's happened in the recent tragedies we've had. And it's now that we've done this work with those respective marae and community groups, we've kind of bought in to the fact that we have knowledge now of what sits out there. And my previous question, why I asked that, if the worst scenario came to bear, that something happened there, and we were fully aware of that impact coming to fruition, but we're sitting in a space of limbo, where is the liability on us for the mere fact we were aware of the situation?
I think the information that's there that these examples have is more around the slow change, specifically around sea level rise and inundation and erosion. So it's not the big events. There's a combination there, but the information really is about change over time. Yeah. Projects. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to hand over to Jane in terms of the kind of the data piece that we hold in terms of our role in providing information to communities.
Kia ora. So this is highlighted in the paper that we've been working on updating our regional climate projections. So the latest projections from the IPCC have been downscaled by NIWA, now Sciences New Zealand, and MFE have made that data available on their website. So we've been putting together a package of information that is going to be provided for our community. So we've been updating our infographic, and this time around the data is available at the TA level as well as the regional level. So each TA will get their own specific infographic. We've also, that bottom right picture is a snip from our interactive climate projection maps. So we've been updating those. You can see the grid squares on there. The new data is available at a much more granular level. So it's 5 kilometers squared now. So we've also increased the number of metrics that are shown on those maps. And then the third piece of the puzzle is the video around our climate change projections. So we've been working with Earth Sciences New Zealand to update our video. So I've got a bit of juggling with technology. So I'm going to give you a sneak peek of the video. We're hoping to get all this information uploaded onto our website by the end of the month to make it available to
Kia ora,
everybody.
I'm Nava Fadayev, a climate scientist with Earth Sciences New Zealand. Climate change is happening now. Rising seas are causing flooding and erosion. Aotearoa's glaciers are melting, and extreme weather events are becoming more common. The recent rise in global temperatures is largely driven by the buildup of gases like carbon dioxide and methane in the atmosphere, which trap heat and warm the planet. As our planet warms, we need to plan for future changes to adapt and thrive. Although climate change seems daunting, understanding what lies ahead helps us find solutions and new opportunities. In this video, we will explore how climate change may impact the Bay of Plenty. We look at 2 possible futures based on different social, economic, and technological trends. These shared socio-economic pathways, or SSPs, considered questions like when will the world population peak, and will economic growth rely on fossil fuels or renewable energy? One future is a path where our current development patterns continue, with a gradual reduction in fossil fuel dependency. The other path focuses on rapid economic growth, prolonging fossil fuel use. While change is inevitable irrespective of the pathway, strong local and global efforts can limit the worst effects and help us adapt. New Zealand has warmed by about 1 degree over the past century, and this warming will continue. By the end of this century, the average temperature in the Bay of Plenty could rise by about 4 degrees under the fossil fuel development pathway, or about 2 degrees under the middle of the road pathway. While these numbers may appear small, these changes shift the climate system and lead to more extreme weather. Some places will warm more than others, affecting natural resources, farming, and encouraging the spread of pests. However, warmer temperatures may also allow new crops to be grown in the Bay of Plenty. Increasing average temperatures also means that extreme temperatures will become more common. Tauranga currently has about 24 hot days a year. By mid-century, this could increase by 28 days, and by the end of the century by 56 days under the middle of the road pathway. Under the fossil fueled path, the increase is even more pronounced, with an extra 111 hot days for Tauranga. As you can see on the map, there is a large variation in the number of hot days across the region. More hot days are likely to impact our physical and mental health and lead to increased energy use for cooling. Seasonal rainfall patterns are likely to change in the Bay of Plenty. Autumn in particular looks to be drier than present. Overall, total annual rainfall may decrease across the region, but extreme rainfall events will likely become more intense and more common. This is because a warmer atmosphere can hold more moisture, and this will be most apparent for short duration events like intense thunderstorms, but we will also see increased rain totals and intensities during events like ex-tropical cyclones. With these changes in rainfall, our roads will be more vulnerable to floods, slips, coastal erosion, and storm surges. Understanding these changes can help us design more resilient infrastructure. At the other end of the spectrum, longer dry spells are expected, which, combined with higher temperatures, will increase drought risk. This will put a strain on freshwater reserves, particularly in summer when streams will increasingly run dry. Sea level rise is certain regardless of any reduction in emissions. This is a major concern for coastal communities and infrastructure. Coastal flooding and erosion are likely to become more common, as well as saltwater intrusion to low-lying groundwater reserves. Depending on the climate change pathway, half a metre of sea level rise is projected to occur between 2075 and 2105, and 1 metre of sea level rise is likely between 2110 and after 2150. This could be catastrophic in many coastal regions, particularly when combined with storm surges or tsunamis, due to increased flooding, severe erosion, and damage to infrastructure and ecosystems. We've discussed 2 possible pathways for our future, and there are others. While we don't know which will happen, understanding the possibilities helps us prepare and prosper. The climate change information available on Bay of Plenty Regional Council's website is there to support discussions across businesses, landowners, tangata whenua, and the wider community working together with the different layers of government to build resilience and adapt to climate change. Kia ora, I'm Nava Fadaya.
Sorry, I'll just stop her from going again. Just hop back into the presentation. So we feel that's a big step up from the current video we have on our website, and you'll see some of that detail at that TA level. And it's going to be a valuable resource again for providing that information to our communities. So we're looking forward to getting that onto our website. So that's one example of where we're providing that kind of robust regional level information. The other area is the local emissions data platform. So currently on our website, we have this carbon footprint from a few years ago from AECOM, which is just a static report on the emissions. It's a good baseline, but you can't really explore and interrogate the data. And this is something that's common across councils across New Zealand. We've all been paying consultants at various different times and getting these different reports in different places. So we've come together as a collective of councils to bring about the Local Emissions Data Platform initiative. So the idea of this initiative is that we've got a consistent approach for local councils to prepare community level greenhouse gas inventories. So then that enables some comparability and within and across regions around those greenhouse gas inventories. So we're currently in the second year of the platform. We've got over 30 councils involved in the project. You can see on the map, they're spread between both islands. The platform itself was developed in Australia. It's been used in Sydney by the Metropolitan Councils there for the last 8 years or so. So that's through a consultancy called Kinesis. We've got a strong project structure in place with a steering group which includes representation from MFE because it's important to stay connected at that national level. And we've got a technical input through the advisory group to help improve and refine the platform and the methodology and the assumptions behind it. And we're also getting support through Te Aura Kahika for the project management of that overall initiative. And one thing just to flag for this year, which is quite exciting, is that Kinesis are going to fill in the gaps of those councils that are not currently subscribed. So we'll actually have a national total made up of these bottom-up inventories. So it'll be, I know it won't match the national reporting figure, but it's a start to then see how we can better align between the national and local level. I'm going to hop into the platform in a second, but just to highlight here, this is, for me, one of the really powerful things about this initiative is the power of the collective. It's the collective of councils working together so that we can be more efficient and cost effective. We're sharing our intel and our resources and to make a better product for everybody, as well as getting that comparability across the regions and between councils. And it also gives local government a much stronger voice when it comes to talking to central government in that emissions reduction space. So more technical. So I'm going to give you a very quick insight into the platform. So this is the landing page for the dashboard. There's a whole lot of information, detailed information that sits behind this. And I won't go into lots of the detail, but just to give you a sense of what's there, this is the map of the Bay of Plenty. As you can see, it's got broken down in there by the suburbs that's using SA2 information from Stats NZ. So you can see that variety of emissions across the region. This is for the 23-24 financial year. So light colours are low total emissions for that area, and darker it gets, the more emissions there are. So there are various different ways that you can cut and slice the data. You'll see along those titles along the bottom. You can look at it via the sector or the source of the emissions. I'm just going to jump to transport because that's obviously an area of interest to this council in terms of public transport particularly. So this is just another example of how you can cut the emissions up. So this is total transport emissions broken down by the TAs. So you can see the share across the region behind those emissions. And then specifically, I wanted to show you how potentially this platform could be used in our decision making. So I've put this graph together here. This is the on-road transport emissions for the region. Those lighter coloured chart bars here are actually taken from the historical AECOM inventories that we've had. We've been able to load those into the platform. So we can see the trend over time. The coloured one here, the stripy one, that's the one that's been actually calculated through the platform for the 23-24 financial year. So that's the on-road transport emissions. That red line running across the graph is the current target that sits in the regional land transport plan. So that target is a 41% reduction in on-road transport carbon emissions between 2019 and 2035. So we have got quite a bit of work over the next 10 years. So, and this is where the other part of the platform is potentially very useful when having those conversations. So this is what we call the decarbonisation pathways tool. So it takes that inventory as a starting point, and what you can model all sorts of scenarios in here, but what Kinesis have done for this particular scenario is they've taken the assumptions that MFE made in developing the National Emissions Reduction Plan. So that those assumptions are available, and they've interpreted those, loaded them into the platform. So that top line in that graph there that you can see is a representation of what the national policies would look like if they played out at the regional level. So I wouldn't say it's realistic because it's not going to play out in quite that way, but it gives us a sense of where the national policies might land. So the detail down that left-hand side, those are all the different initiatives, and they've got those assumptions in there from MFE. But what we can do is we can add in our own local initiatives. So I've popped in some other targets from the Regional Land Transport Plan. So this one here, there's a target in the RLTP to increase the proportion of EVs in the light vehicle fleet to 30% by 2035. So there's already some targets within the ERP that's looking at increasing EV uptake. So that's included in MFE's assumptions. So the additional uptake that's needed in order to meet the RLTP target is another 15%. So you can see that on that's 2035 there. So that's when that RLTP target comes in, and that's the difference it would make to that theoretical national line. So I've also included the other RLTP targets in that line that's sitting below the ERP line. Just to give you a sense of how you can play around with this information, you can try out the impact of different policies, look at different scenarios. So it has the potential to be a powerful tool to have conversations to look at possible initiatives that you might want to support through public transport and wider transport conversations. So that's one way in which we can use the platform. And we have Rebecca here, who is going to show us another way in which the platform has been used so far.
Kia ora koutou. So part of developing the natural environment story for our regional profile, I exported data out of the LEDP tool to so that we could see the sources of emissions across our region, and I aggregated them, the TA data, into our 3 key sub-regions. Rolling down through our climate change section. So the point we're making here is that while we know we've got natural resources that can absorb emissions, to really make a dent, we do need to look at the where our emissions are coming from. And so this is where this tool could help. And so we've got our greenhouse gas emissions by source dashboard in our regional profile. And this is an interactive tool, so we can just break it down looking at the whole Bay of Plenty region. We can see we've got 41 or 42% from transport, 35 from agriculture, but then we can have a look at the different sub-regions. So obviously in the Eastern Bay, it's nearly half in agriculture compared to Western Bay, which is more urban. We've got over 50% emissions coming from transport. The second page of this.
Industrial products and something.
That's
Process,
like
yes.
coming out of chemicals and manufacturing. And then this second page is just looking, so you can see obviously the Western Bay of Plenty is a lot larger in terms of population. So that's why you've got that huge variance. This connects back to spatial planning, obviously, that what Nick was talking about earlier. So the pathway tools could potentially support the development of spatial scenarios that demonstrate how different urban forms, transport networks and growth decisions could influence future emissions pathways.
Thank you, Rebecca. So that's just gives you a bit of a sense of what the platform has got in it and how it can be used. And of course, there's, as we discussed earlier, there's the sharing the information with Priority One for their regional energy strategy. There's another aspect we're currently working on is looking at incorporating emissions from peat soils. So Waikato have done a lot of work on that area. I know there's work done at MFE, and we're connecting with MFE around how we kind of join the dots between us so that we're not using different processes and numbers. So that was all on the platform. I'll hand back to Nick.
Yes, we just wanted to pull out some examples for you of some of the work that we do to give you a flavour, and then going forward we'll just have a quarterly report for you with progress from the quarters. Happy to take any more questions, comments.
Great, thank you. Councillor Karatai.
Kia ora team, thank you for that. It was interesting to watch that video and to see what was missing from it. And the glaring thing for me was the absence of kōrero around the sea surface temperatures and the impact of that, because the problem with using 1 degree, 2 degrees is that people actually just don't understand what that means and what the impact is. Where you show them the sea surface temperatures and how ours have gone up and explain that contribution to extreme weather, people have a much better sense of what's actually happening in the environment. So it just feels like a real missed opportunity there. And also what's missing is the kōrero around that. We hear the language all the time of 1 in 100 event, 1 in 100-year event, 1 in 50-year event. Actually, what a decade ago was a 1 in 50-year event, that has already changed so much. So people are reusing language because they actually don't understand what it means. there's a lot of education that needs to happen in that space to help people understand the impact of what's really happening in the climate at the moment. But yeah, interesting presentation. Thank you.
Just through you, Chair, just to note that the information in the video, that was directly from the information that's provided by MFE from the IPCC, and it doesn't actually include those sea temperature figures, but that's something that we could, look to get a bit more information on. So, yeah, thank you.
Councillor McMillan.
Oh, this isn't a question, just a comment of, this is awesome. And with the timing, with the regional spatial plan and the work that's going to be happening there. And I think our role is, in governance is to really ram this in to the spatial plan. And I know Namuta's listening, but yeah, obviously with the adaptation framework and all of those pieces coming together, that's part of legislation anyway. But I think we need to get ahead of the curve here and really start utilising, this tool and others to really shape that spatial planning and how we look at enabling best practice. So I think this is really exciting and timely, and yeah, great work.
Further questions, councillors? No, thank you very much, Rebecca, Jane and Nick, for your reporting and work. And I agree. I think all of the information that we've had today is going to be really useful for the planning that's going, that is before us. So thank you. Oh, hang on, I've got to move your report. Can I please have a mover? Councillor Dougal, and seconded by Councillor McMillan. All those in favour? Thank you. Any against? And the report is received. Thank you all. So we are now moving on to our last item for today, which is 8.5. This is page 303, and we have Karen and Steve Slack, who are going to report on the People and Capability and Health and Safety Quarterly Report. Thank you, Karen and Steve.
Good afternoon, Chair and councillors. Yes, I'm here. I'm Stephen Slack, the Risk and Assurance Manager at the Council, and Health and Safety forms part of my team. I'm here with Karen Aspey, who's the General Manager of People and Leadership. So we present a combined report to the committee just to give some more information and background to the Arataki dashboards that some of our information goes through. So I'm happy to hand over to Karen to present the first part of the report and for any questions on that, and then I'll follow up with the second part on health and safety.
Steve. Good afternoon, councillors. So you have the paper in front of you, which I will take as read. Just to help position this, you may remember a while ago when you were all being inducted, we spent a little bit of time and I took you through Rotanga to Rapukanga, which is our people strategy. Just gave you a real overview as to how do we think about how we support our people to deliver for our communities. The report that you've got in front of you is where we have, you're very aware of our changing context and changing environment that we're all working in, and how we've really looked at that strategy, which is still highly relevant, but really focusing on some of the things that our people need from us at the moment in order to be able to continue to deliver. And so that's what we've articulated in the paper. I will take it as read and really happy to I'd hand over to Steve to talk about the health and safety aspect a little more, or to answer questions.
Councillor Defoe had a question. And
Kia ora. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Karen. And thank you for being the last ones on the list today, especially before lunch. Anyway, my question is basically around health and safety, around people strategy and culture. Is there any cultural safety tools for all staff and councillors in regards to safety within a cultural context, and especially in Te Ao Māori?
So yes, and we think about that in many, many different ways. Probably the best route to answer that question is via our surveys, where We ask a lot of deep questions, and this context is one of the sections that we ask questions on to understand how are our staff feeling from a cultural safety perspective and a broader psychological safety perspective. So from that perspective, we understand if there are any hotspots within the organisation that we need to delve into and understand more deeply whether or not there are some challenges there. So that's one avenue. We also have I would say we have a really high trust culture within our organisation, and either via our unions, via our leaders, via a whole variety of routes, we'll often deeply understand whether or not there are any challenges in that context. And so that's outside of the survey cycle to help us to really understand what that might look like.
Well, the process in regards to it, before it escalates into something that comes to council table, is there another process after surveys and interaction with certain staff? Because do you actually get full information in regards to those surveys around cultural safety practices that are identified in there? And if they haven't identified it, but it's needed, what other supports are in place for our staff to get that cultural safety aspect before it escalates and comes to a committee meeting or a council meeting? That's just my thoughts around it.
Absolutely. So you can't possibly know what you don't know. So I accept that. My sense is that we have a very strong feedback culture within our organisation. So our Astra team surveys, I think the last one had 95% return rate, which is significantly above what you would expect when we benchmark with other organisations. So that gives me a level of confidence. When we then look at the verbatim comments, it's anonymous. So when we then look at the verbatim comments, staff are very open about their feedback, and we've built that culture over a long period of time. Then there's another route, which is via our unions. So sometimes if staff aren't comfortable to come and talk to their people leader or to open up in that broader context, then there is another route there for them as well, and that has happened. And so we do have a really good relationship with our unions where they will sometimes bring those challenges to us on an anonymous basis, and we can lend support in that way as well. So I think we've got a variety of different channels that are open to staff who might be experiencing challenges in that space. We also do a lot of learning and development in this space as well. So things like tikanga, te reo, just raising awareness in terms of cultural capability so that we're looking at it from that lens as well in terms of, is there a capability or learning avenue that we can look at that from?
But my suggestion, I did have it written down here, is that for best practice, if we can actually organise a yearly catch up and revisit cultural safety practices for old staff and new staff that align to our Te Amorangi or our Te Arapautama framework, and also aligns to some of the aspects around tikanga and kaua. That's my sort of recommendation, please. Ngā mihi nui.
And I just would note, you know, the sort of the positive reporting that comes out of, despite the, you know, the uncertainty around the current changes that are happening too. So just to acknowledge that. Should we get Steve to speak now briefly to the health and safety side?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So with respect to health and safety, so I'm happy to take the report as read and take questions as well. I just highlight that within this first report, we have done a bit of a deep dive that we took from a previous deep dive in terms of health and safety for the Risk and Assurance Committee, just to give some comfort to the committee in terms of the mitigations we have in place for health and safety. So the first part of the report just goes through a number of the tools and other processes that we have in place to manage health and safety, because I am aware that quite a number of you weren't at that previous deep dive. So just to give that comfort to the committee that we have those procedures in place. And then the remainder of the report is just some of the key indicators that we have in terms of our health and safety program. Given it's the first meeting, we did those for the first 6 months of the year to give some insight as well. But happy to take the report as read and answer any questions you might have on that.
Any councillors have any questions on the health and safety side? Right, just a note that I always look for near misses because that shows that people are registering things and hopefully learning from them and taking action. So that's great. Thank you both, Steve and Karen, for your reporting. Can I get a mover, please, for this report? Councillor Maltby and seconded by Councillor Scrimmager. All those in favour? Any against? Motion that we have received the report. Thank you very much. So we had no extra items to consider on the agenda. So can I now ask Councillor Tafoe to close the hui with a karakia?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and congratulations on your first hui. It went really well. And also to Deputy Chair, Councillor Sarah McCorkindale, hinui kia korua. Kia wātea mai te tapu, kia wātea mai te kōrero, kia wātea, aira kua wātea, tuturu whakamaua kia tīna, haumi e, hui e, tāiki e, tēnā tātou.